Hello guys, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was the outcast but became the storm that shook the nation? If you enjoy this video then please like, share and do comment. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. So let us start the story.
Hokage Monument. Dusk, 8 p.m. A young boy was sitting on a spike of the Yondaimi's stone hair. If one were to see the boy's gaze, they would think that he was staring at the horizon, thinking some deep thoughts, and, in a way, they would be right. But the thing they would most likely notice would be his appearance. He had a black shirt that covered his chest and upper arms. Over the shirt he had a dark red vest, left open, with 2 pockets on each side, and an orange fox curled on itself on the back. His pants were a dark blue, with a pouch on each tight. Tattoos covered his hands and forearms, along with his stomach, his face a bit feral, which, combined with the 3 whisker-like marks on his cheeks, made him look like a fox. His hair, however, was his most noteworthy, being a vibrant yellow at the roots and a deep red at the tips. The colors made an orange fringe right where they touched. The boy was named Uzumaki Naruto, and he was meditating under the morning sun, trying to improve the control he had over the energies raging inside him. But he couldn't concentrate on his life force, for on but 1 hour, he would be assigned to a team. He would be assigned to a formal teacher, rather than his mother, sealed inside him. He was nervous. It was the first day in 4 years that he would show his true self. Checking his watch, the young Uzumaki threw himself from the spike he was on, to the small lake behind the Hokage Tower. 20 minutes later, he was back at the top of the mountain, walking to the forest with Big Scroll. Konoha's Forest. Night, 10:30 p.m. Naruto was sitting on a forest clearing, hunched over the scroll, reading the jutsus that were on it. He was trying to find a way to break the seal on his stomach, but try as he might, the only thing he saw were either suicidal techniques, incredibly chakra-exhausting jutsus, or things that could kill you if done wrong. With a sigh, the tattooed boy copied 3 clone techniques, 4 Fuuten Judas, 5 Suiten, and his idol's Rasengan. He would have copied the Hiranshin too, had it been on the scroll. Hours later, around midnight, the blonde red-haired boy was panting. He was sure that he would fall asleep as soon as he lay down on his bed, but in his mind, it was worth it. He had managed to learn one of the justus he copied from the scroll, the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, that let the user create solid but fragile copies of himself. Granted, it wouldn't be of much use in battle, but if what he had read was true, he could make his training go faster. Oh, he wouldn't abuse the shadow clones for the memory feedback. His healing was fast, but he doubted he could survive suddenly experiencing hundreds of things at the same time. But using up to 10 clones a time would definitely speed up the process. He was about to open the scroll again when he heard leaves rustling nearby. He gathered his remaining energy and stood still, tensed, waiting for anything. 30 seconds later, Amino Iruka appeared on the clearing and Naruto relax. I should have known you would find me, Iruka ni. He said, seriously, you steal the forbidden scroll of seals, and the only thing you say when you see me is that. Iruka sighed. Whatever, come, I'll take to the Hokage Tower. As he was making his way to Naruto, a giant shuriken embedded itself on the ground between them. They turned their heads towards the source of the weapon. I knew it was a good idea following Iruka. After all, you are always the one that finds the demon after his pranks. A white-haired man was standing on a branch, arms crossed and an arrogant smirk on his face. Now Naruto, why don't you give me the scroll so I can give you your Hite 8? Naruto, run, take the scroll and run. Iruka had all his attention on Mizuki, and he knew that he could only win if he fought all out and playing tricks. Now why would he do that? I'm pretty sure he would like to know about why the villagers hate him. That caught Naruto's attention. He would break that law? Oh, he does want to know, so I guess I will tell you. You see, remember the classes about the Kyuubi attic? Naruto was pretty sure he was going to insult his mother. That did not prepare him for what Iruka said. Naruto, don't listen to him. I know you, and whatever Mizuki is gonna say is a lie. That made Naruto really surprised, his eyes and mouth wide open. Irula knew his secret? Then why hadn't he acted like the other villagers? Yes, he knew he was hated, and even then, the day he met the man, the only thing he saw in his eyes was mirth. Like if he was only regarding any other orphan wanting to become a ninja. Oh, I wouldn't be so sure. After all, you see He was interrupted by Iruka returning the shuriken back at Mizuki. He blocked it with a pair of kunai. When the weapon fell to the floor he saw Iruka leaping at him, an angry expression on his face. Kunai held in his hand on a reverse grip, ready to strike. Mizuki simply scoffed, guarded and blocked the strike, leaving him and Iruka on a stalemate, but eventually he managed to overpower the Chunin teacher, throwing him to the ground below. Iruka gasped, the air leaving his lungs, but managed to roll away and stand before a drop kick from his opponent was driven to the spot where he was but seconds ago. Iruka saw Mizuki move, and raised his arms to block a kick to his chest, before grabbing the leg and throwing Mizuki to a tree close by. Mizuki flipped midair, landing with his feet on the tree trunk. He bent his knees, using the momentum gained to launch himself at Iruka, fist raised, aiming to the centrum. The brown-haired man dodged to the right, managing to get out of the flying man's path. He turned around and threw a handful of shuriken at Mizui, who had just landed, and they connected. Only for the traitor to turn into the log, and appear behind Iruka, driving a kunai into his back. The man gasped as the metal weapon pierced his flesh, and turned around to try to give the white-haired man a punch in the head, but it was blocked, and he has thrown to a tree, back first, to push the knife in deeper. Only to be grabbed by a black and red blur, and left to lie down on the grass. Naruto had watched the fight in fascination. The attacks he could barely follow, the force he knew could knock him out. It was the first time he had seen a battle without it being controlled by instructors, or not having to see the opponent hold back. He knew he could outwit both Chunin, but in a straight fight, he would be death. But when he saw his Oni-san get pierced and thrown, he didn't think, he just acted, grabbed him midair, and lied him face down on the ground. If you hurt him anymore, he growled, his head low and eyes covered by his spikes, I will return it, 100-fold. He raised his head, and Mizuki was surprised by the hatred on the boy's eyes, but he recovered and grinned. Yeah? And just how would you do that, brat? After all, you are but a roach against me. Naruto didn't rise to the taunt, instead, he moved his hands to the only seal of the jutsu he learned that night and said, Toju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. And Mizuki found himself surrounded by hundreds multicolored teens. The last thing he saw were the copies jumping onto him. Iruka could only look in awe at the horde of Narutos, impressed that an almost 13-year-old had that much chakra. No wonder he had a problem with the normal Bunshin he taught, and smiled as he looked at his surrogate Otuoto. Naruto chuckled sheepishly as he stared at Mizuki's bloodied form and scratched his head as he looked at his teacher. I think I overdid it, TT Ibeo. Iruka could only chuckle before wincing and getting help from the younger kid to go to the Hokage's office, where the red-tipped boy would receive his forehead protector. Naruto's apartment 1:30 a.m. Naruto was asleep on his feet, but even then, the smile was fixed on his face. He had done it. He managed to become a genin, even if it was with an unorthodox method. He walked from the door to his room, undressing his mood, trying to get to the bed before falling asleep. He put on his sleeping cap, and with a yawn, he fell face first on the mattress. Mindscape. Naruto's mind had changed a lot since his childhood. At first it had been a boiler room with leaks, but after 8 years, it was no longer. Between his mother's affection, the people who liked him, and, to a lesser extent, the interactions with the Kurama, it became what most would call the most peaceful place they had ever seen. It was an open space, with trees strewn about, a lake was to the side, flower beds were abundant, bathing the place with a floral smell. The moon was high in the sky, lighting the place with an ethereal glow. It was in the middle of his mind that a groggy Naruto found himself, wondering why had he gone there instead of the dreamland. He had wanted to visit the Sea of Ramen again. His lost visit had been interrupted by the damn alarm clock, especially since he was still tired from the last day. It was during his musings that he was tackled by nine-tailed, dog-sized fox, who was grinning like a lunatic. This fox was dark orange, with shadows around his eyes, that were a deep red, shining with mirth. Kurama Getiv, I wanna sleep, TT Ibeo. Naruto grumbled, but Kurama's grin only got bigger. Nah, I'll stay here, the fox said in amusement. You are particularly comfortable today. Naruto only managed a tired glare. Now don't give me that look, we called you here for a reason. It was then that Naruto heard a laugh from his right. Kurama, let Naru-kun up. I want to talk with him. Uzumaki Kushina was a beautiful woman, with her fair skin, flaming red hair that matched her personality, slightly round face with noble features, amethyst eyes and hourglass figure. Many would fight to be close to her. She was wearing a blue kimono with several spirals on it, a purple obi around her waist, and an amused smile on her face. "Hi, Ka-chan, thank you." He was referring to the fact that he had had trouble breathing with Kurama on his chest. Naruto had met his mother and the Kyuubi when he was 5 years old. He had passed out from exhaustion after 3 days on the street with no place to sleep. Since then most of his afternoons passed with him following his mother's regime or simply talking with them, either on his mindscape or losing himself on the horizon. "You're welcome, Sochi, but we do have to talk, Tt Ebane." One of the things that ran on the family was the verbal tick. "Now that you are a shinobi, we'll have to up your training, especially with your clones on it." "He'll have to wait for his team to be assigned," Kurama interrupted. "Your training will have to be scheduled to not interrupt his teachers, and I plan to train him to." The blonde-rooted boy was shocked. It would be the first time the fox stepped in on his training, and he was already thinking of all the things he would learn. He imagined himself spouting foxfire and fighting along a summon. But his fantasy was interrupted by a tail in the head, launching him away and making him face-plant close to a tree. "Damn it, you fox. Don't do that, you Ogurita Z Baka." Unfortunately for Naruto, it was the tree his mother was leaning against. "Don't curse in front of me, Aho," and as such, he received a punch on the scalp, slamming him on the ground again. Of CPURS, the team didn't have the guts to point out the irony of the statement. "As amusing it is to watch you two ninjin, you should take the week off, boy. No heavy training, if anything just continue your morning routine," Kurama told him, "and your study with your mother. I want out of here already." He mumbled the last part. "Hi, can I sleep now? I'm tired, and I want to visit Iruka Nii." Kushina smiled and sat with her back resting on the tree trunk, and put her son's head on her lap, making him yawn and coodle. Kurama saw this and shrank, so he could fit between the arms of the boy he was sealed inside. That nitght. Both Fox and Kid fell asleep to a mother's lullaby. But what he had said shocked Naruto. He had slept in, he would be late to take his registration photo unless he didn't take a shower, and he couldn't eat his morning dose of ramen, meaning he would be cranky until the ramen had its daily sacrifice, and he would have to appease the log too, since as far as he knew, Mizuki wasn't a follower, and the traitor had used a Kawarimi during his fight with Iruka. He knew his day would be, in the words of his Nara friend, troublesome. The boy dressed quickly, the place of his usual attire taken by a full shirt that had the blue Uzumaki swirl on the front. He had also put on his forehead protector as a collar, and put goggles on his forehead, before bolting out of the window into the roofs, jumping streets and alleys in a desperate effort to get to the Hokage Tower before 12. During the way he found many shinobi patrolling the rooftops of Konoha. The poor bastards never stood a chance. Uzumaki Naruto tackled, pushed and shoved them out of his way. He even shocked a poor cat with a ribbon on its head. And the cat joined him in his run. He was running like the hounds of hell were after him, and he managed to get to his destination on time, despite the many angry chunin after him. "Made it." Tt Ibeo, a panting stamina machine, looked at the animal at his side, and carefully removed the ribbon on its ear. After that, the cat took off again. He entered the tower, a destination clear in his head, the place that would mark him as a ninja, the place that would make him a kid with a clear path to take. Hokage's office 30 minutes later. An old man in his late 60s, dressed in red robes, sat behind a desk filled with papers, appraising the registration photo his surrogate grandson had gone with. He had expected something a bit more lively, if not eccentric. "You know, I am surprised that you look serious on this, though I would have liked it more had you not brought your nightcap with you." Indeed, had it not been for that, the boy on the picture would have been the image of nobility. The black shirt he had on with his family's spiral on front, combined with the steeled face and the ninja goggles, and the almost visible aura of regality were all ruined by the cap on top of his head, a hat that took the form of a grinning fox. "Mo, it's not my fault I overslept, Tt Ibeo. With what happened yesterday I didn't get to sleep until 2 GG. The orange-fringed boy was pouting. He wanted the photo to intimidate, not to make the female population scream, kawaii, as his mother had when she saw the photo, or the male to laugh, as Kurama had done. Be it as it may, you can't take another photo since it already is afternoon. The old man was struggling to keep the grin of his face, out of sympathy to boy, but the pouting boy in front of him was just so amusing. Said boy could only groan in disappointment, before grinning much like Kurama the night before. "Guess I'll have to pull another prank," he thought, before saying, "Fine, I'll be going now Gigi. The log and the ramen demand my presence. Now Sarutobi was openly smiling, his eyes dancing with mirth, thinking about how the boy took after both his parents. Seriously, it's like his parents left him a handbook on ways of lie, or something, if only he knew. So Gigi, you still haven't figured out the secret to paperwork? A pained face was his answer. Well, it's easy really, you just gotta use. He was interrupted by a boy who looked 3 years younger than Naruto bursting into the office shouting a battle cry, before tripping with the scarf that was way too large on the frame of the boy. And looking back at Hiruzen, it probably happened often, so he did the only thing someone on his position could have done. He snorted, as did his tenants. The boy groaned and sat up, rubbing the sore spot on his forehead. Someone must have placed traps, he muttered, before spotting the red blonde and glaring. Why the hell did you trip me? The brown-haired kid demanded. Seriously, echoed the voices in his head, before he walked the fallen boy and picked him by his blue scarf. Don't blame people for your clumsiness, Datbeo. Both men were now in a glaring contest. Another man had now busted into the office, wearing only blue, shades covering his eyes, his forehead protector sewn into a bandana. And while Naruto could feel glaring eyes, they did not feel as the usual ones he got from civilians. What are you doing, Gaki? Put Sandame Sama's grandson down, immediately. Ah, so that was why the brat was let in. And said boy was looking smug. Ha, you heard him, he said. I'm his, points at Sarutobi, grandson, you gotta put me down. Naruto looked at the man, then at the kid, and at the Hokage. Whatever, you're still a brat, he said, before throwing him at the couch. Right so, I'm going now Gigi. Mago no Gaki, Teme. With that said he jumped out the window. He was at least 3 blocks away when he heard a shout of, he didn't tell me the secret. Konoha's main street 2 hours later. Naruto was annoyed. First someone had repeatedly interrupted his daily prayers to the log by coming in and out of his detection range, then he had the feeling of being talked about somewhere, and lastly, someone now taken a bad costume and trailed him where he went, and it was grating on his nerves. Right now he was headed for his favorite restaurant in order to offer a sacrifice to the ramen, and he was about to make it there, when he finally blew up. Okay, why the hell are you following me, Datbeo? He shouted at a rock on the other side of the road. Everyone knows that rocks aren't square. As he had said, a bad costume. He stood there, glaring at the rock, waiting for something to happen, and just as he was turning around, the box exploded in colorful smokescreens, after which he heard coughs and groans. He was 70% sure that it was the same kid from the Hokage's office. Hey, so you did see me? Not that I expected any less. And there it was, the same loud voice. The blonde-rooted boy sighed, and told the younger boy, listen kid, if you got anything to say, wait till I have my ramen, if not, then get lost, and he said it again. Ichiraku minutes later. The Ichiraku ramen stand was a small building, only big enough to house about a dozen people, apart from the chef and his daughter working in the kitchen. Said people were some of the only civilians that saw Naruto as a person, and some may even think that Ichiraku Ayame, the owner's first and only daughter, had a crush on the red-tipped blonde. The owner, Ichiraku Tuchi, was a man in his mid to late 40s, with a heavy build. He wore a dirty apron over a white shirt. His hair was already starting to gray, but it was mostly covered by his hat. His daughter, Ichiraku Ayame, was 3 years older than Naruto. She kept in shape, so her body was lean, and her brown hair was covered by a white bandana, except for 3 bangs, 2 framing her face and 1 reaching her right brow. Right now, she was watching the 2 boys in front of her, amused by the shocked face the younger of the 2 was displaying, obviously having never seen someone eat as much or as fast as the spiky-haired boy was eating. After his 5th bowl, Naruto began to slow down his eating to that of a normal person, allowing the scarfed boy to get out of his stupor and to start his own bowl. So, what's your name? I doubt you want me to call you Mago no Gaki. The boy looked up from his ramen. My name is Konohamaru, answered the boy. I was named in honor of the village, so that I would always be known, but everyone sees me only as the honorable grandson, and never by me. The boy sniffed. Who would have thought? His position is kinda like mine, thought the log practitioner, receiving an answer from his mother. Yes, I remember Tsunade telling us that she was like that before making herself a name. Konohamaru continued to speak. That's why I want to beat Jii-chan, so everybody knows who I am. A snort from Kurama drove his attention inwards again. Sounds to me like a chance to corrupt the youth. Make him your apprentice. Kushina tried to hit the fox, but it escaped before she could. No, you can't have a student yet, Tt Ebane. She opposed the idea, mainly because of the reaction it would bring. Wait another couple of years. I could teach something like control, that would help him. Okay kid. You got me. He scratched the back of his neck. I will teach something. Konohamaru's eyes widened, and Naruto grew a smirk. But you gotta be fast, Datbeo. Nato threw his wallet to Ayame, confident that she would take care of it, and took off running, leaving behind a gaping kid and an amused waitress. Training ground number 7. 2 hours later. Naruto was grinning, and grinning hard. For the best part of the last 2 hours, he had led Konohamaru in a merry chase throughout the village and the surrounding forests, and the kid had kept up with him. Granted he had been weighted down, but still, it was impressive. Well kid, you managed to impress me, so I will teach you something. He pointed to the tree. Lay down with your feet on the trunk. Konohamaru looked confused, but did it nonetheless. Now channel chakra to your feet, to get them to stick to the trunk, but put too much, and you will get blasted, so careful. Konohamaru immediately started, wanting to complete the exercise, while Naruto himself made a couple of shadow clone to practice a bit on both his taijutsu and on his kekkei genkai. The Uzumaki clan was a strange one. Apart from the passive kikei genkai that gave them a ready mind for seals and a large life force, once in a while, a kid would awaken on of the 3 active bloodlines. Said kids would often be apprenticed by an adult that had the same ability. The 3 bloodlines were this. Chakura Chunyu. That would allow a Uzumaki to either heal, poison or disrupt an enemy. It was basically what it said, by injecting the user's potent chakra, and depending on the intention, the target would either be healed of superficial injuries at the rate of a normal Uzumaki, or it would act as a poison and either disrupt the target's feel for his own chakra, or killing them over time. Most of the holders of the ability either specialized in support or in taijutsu. Then there was the Iden o Kogeki, the rarest of the 3. By pushing the user's chakra into any ninjutsu, the Uzumaki with this bloodline could redirect or cancel a just you. This is mainly because the dense chakra could neutralize the original one present in the technique. All holders were incredibly good ninjutsu users. And lastly was the Kogen no Buki. It gave the Uzumaki with it the ability to create weapons out of chakra, and they would be golden in color, hence the name. Weapons created by this are incredibly hard to break, and could be used as a focus, making them good for armed ninjutsu, but the user could only create one kind of weaponry, so the tool was materialized for the first time, and then the Uzumaki had to study on its use, before being capable of effectively using the bloodline. An example of this would be Uzumaki Kushina, capable of using chakra chains. Naruto himself had the Kogen no Buki, and could create a set of claws that would stick to his hands and feet. Think of the falcon talons of Ninja Gaiden 2. This made study taijutsu styles that could be modified to allow their use in battle. In the end he ended up with a style that would mix kicks, punches, thrust and swipes, and tweak the stances a bit. Hence the clones working on both at the same time while he watched Konohamaru. Meanwhile, Ebisu was not having a good day. He had lost his charge not only once, but twice in the same day. The first time he had attacked his grandfather and got himself hurt by the Kyuubi container. He was no fool however, and the only reason he disliked the kid was because of his pranks, but he was sure that the brat had wanted to do more to the honorable grandson, and he, the elite Junin he was, wouldn't allow it. So when his charge disappeared for the second time in the same day, he knew he had to act, and as such, he tracked the kid and his pupil. When he found them he saw his young pupil lying down with his feet to a tree, a frustrated expression on his face, and some ways away, he saw the Jinchuriki looking amused, while 6 clones were sparring with another, with golden claws. He was about to burst into the clearing when he saw Sandame Sama's grandson start taking steps up the tree trunk. He absently noted that the redhead's expression changed to impressed. Right then he decided to walk into the training ground, rather than bursting into it. When he entered the clearing, he spoke, "I admit, if you managed to get him to do the tree-walking exercise, I may have underestimated you." Konohamaru lost concentration and slipped from the branch he was hanging, while Naruto only looked at him, an inquisitive expression present. "I have tried to get him to grasp the basics for some time now." Naruto nodded. "Well, I suppose you want him back?" Ebisu gave an affirmative sound. "I'm leaving then, Kono." The boy looked at him. "Keep practicing until it's second nature." He started walking away, and don't doubt to look for me Datbeo. With that he stepped out of the clearing, leaving the Junin to ponder. Wait, Oni-san, Konohamaru shouted. Thank you for helping me, but from now on, we are rival, and I will be better than you. Naruto smiled slightly. In the end, it had not been a bad day. He had impressed a Jonin and gained a follower. Hopefully the rest of the week would be as good. Naruto's apartment 8:30 a.m. A week had passed since the day Mizuki had turned traitor. It was the talk of the village. Most people knew the official story, that he had tried to steal the sacred scroll of seals, and only 4 people knew the true story, one of them in prison. During the week Naruto was constantly working to improve his seals, apart from trying to master his Kogan no Buki. Right now, it took him a full minute to materialize his claws, and the only seals he could do effectively were only useful for training and storage. He only knew how to do the explosive tag because it was cheaper making them than buying. Today would be his last peaceful day, the last day of his life as a civilian. Today he would be assigned to the people who would become his team, his nakama. He could only hope that they wouldn't be demon haters. The young Jinchuriki woke up at 8:30, took a shower and gave the ramen its morning sacrifice, before grabbing his goggles and Hite-8, putting the former on his forehead and tying the latter on his neck, filled his shuriken and kunai holsters, before sealing the rest on the storage seals on his forearms and wrists, and proceeded to do his usual exercise routine, before heading out to the academy. Shinobi Academy 9:30 a.m. The classroom was bustling with voices. Kids 12 and 13 were talking among themselves, excited about finally becoming genin, trying to predict what the future would bring to them. When young Naruto entered the class, the kids glanced at him, before returning to their conversations, but he paid them no mind, and took a seat near the only 4 kids he could call friends. These 4 kids were the heirs to their clans, Aburame Shino, Nara Shikamaru, Akamichi Choji and Hyuga Hinata. And none of them had been corrupted by the older generations, because their families understood who he was, and not what he held. Shino was a tall boy, with bushy brown hair, a tan jacket with a large collar that covered the lower part of his face and sunglasses over his eyes. He, like the rest of his clan, used Kakaichu bugs for tracking and his techniques. His friendship with Naruto had started when the red-tipped boy asked him about his bugs, and Shino was skeptical at first, but explained about his destruction bugs, and by the end of his explanation, he and Naruto were collecting all kinds of insects around the academy playground. Shikamaru was about his height, with a mesh shirt under a tan vest with green linings, black hair put on a pineapple-like style, like the rest male Naras. Shikamaru was chronically lazy, often falling asleep as soon his head touched anything to help support it, but his highly analytical mind more than made up for his laziness. Their relationship started when Naruto asked to play shogi, a strategy game, Shikamaru explained. And Naruto wanted to play. The Nara would later admit that his completely random moves had him thinking, and sometimes he lost to the boy's unpredictability. Choji was a large boy with an average stature. His brown hair was only visible from the 2 spiky patches coming out from his bandana. On his cheeks he had spirals, and his shirt had the kanji for food. He was constantly eating, but he also trained his muscles, needing the strength for his clan's expansion technique. He had met Naruto after being introduced by Shikamaru. He had been shy during the first meeting, since he was out of his comfort zone, but when Naruto defended him from some bullies, he opened up. By the time the 4th meeting came around, the two were on chip-sharing terms. Hyuga Hinata had short, dark blue hair, wore a baggy beige hoodie jacket with her clan symbol. Hinata was a weird one. She was shy and would often retreat into her clothes, and while she hated hurting others, she wouldn't hesitate to injure if threatened. She had met Naruto when he saved her from some bullies that were humiliating her when they were 6 years old. Since then she had a crush on the boy, and would often blush when around him. He had helped her with training, and because of it he had modified the Jiyuken to be more flexible. They talked their time away, with Naruto and Shikamaru having a quick game of shogi, and eating from the extra-large bag of potato chips Choji had brought. It was about 10 a.m. when Iruka entered the classroom, and while he expected the conversations, he did not welcome them, so he did his signature henge, the Akuma no Itama. Okay brats, shut up and pay attention. He withheld a smile when everyone turned to him. Today you shall receive your team, and they will become something important to you over time. He looked at every kid in the eye and continued. They will be your comrades until you make chunin. They will have your back, and your sensei will help you become the best you can. He grabbed the name list from the desk. Your teams will be the following. Team 1, all the members from Team 1 to 6 were civilian, so they were inconsequential. Team 7, Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura, a declaration of love ensued, and Inosuke Kiba under Hitaki Kakashi. Team 8 are Uzumaki Naruto, Hyuga Hinata and Aburame Shino under Yuhi Kurenai, and since Team 9 is still in circulation, Team 10 members are Nara Shikamaru, Akamichi Choji and Yamanka Ino under Sarutobi Azuma. That is all, come back in 1 hour to meet your senseis. A man on his 30s entered the room. The man had a lit cigar hanging from his lips, a bandana on his arm and the official Junin outfit. Alright Team 10, with me. We're getting to know each other over lunch. With that said he left the room, Shikamaru, Ino and Choji following. Irika only sighed before dismissing the teams. His only thought was on how the other teachers had at least. A crash from the window followed by a poofing sound made him want to weep. Hour and a half later. Yuhi Kurenai was a beautiful woman and she knew it. Her skin was without imperfections. Her hair was as dark as a raven and made in messy waves. Her eyes were a deep ruby red and her figure was stunning. Her dress consisted of a wrap-like dress, with a red sleeve on her right side. She often called herself the older sister kind of woman, but on the field, she was severe, a leader through and through. Right now she was sitting near a stream on a park, staring at her team, trying to gauge the skills of the two boys, since she had helped train the girl, and felt herself frown at the hyperactive behavior of the boy who looked as if he had dyed his hair. She had met only one person with that attribute, and it would be scary if the two ever met. She smiled at the kids before her and started speaking. Hello, we'll start with introductions, and since I'm sure you know each other I'll start. My name is Yuhi Kurenai. I like vodka, wine and salty taco. I dislike perverts and cake. My hobbies are spending time with my friends and creating genjutsu, and my dream is to have a family. She pointed to Hinata. Anyo, I'm Hi Hinata. IL like C cinnamon rolls and G gardening. ID dislike arrogance and F fighting. My hobby is P pressing F flowers, and my doctor dream is to become a clan head. Kurenai nodded. She had expected that, but her confidence needed work. She pointed at Shino. My name is Aburame Shino. I like my friends and logic. I dislike arguments, arrogance and speaking more than necessary. My hobbies are finding new kinds of bugs, and my dream is to become a good leader for my clan. The red-eyed beauty nodded at Naruto. Hopefully her assessment would be wrong. Names Uzumaki Naruto Datbeo. I like the ramen, the log, my friends and the Ichiraku. I hate arrogance, opinions with no proof, and those who disrespect me. My hobbies are training and tasting and comparing different kinds of ramen and my dream is to become Hokage, and there went that hope. She sighed before looking at her genin. Well, now that that's out of the way, I have to explain something to you. Tomorrow there will be another exam. She chuckled at the expression on Naruto's face. You see, the test you did was to weed out hopeless cases, so tomorrow, meet me at training ground 8 at noon. Yane? She left the stream and went to the village, intent on having a cup of wine. Training ground 811 am. Naruto, Hinata and Shino were sitting on the shade of a tree, discussing their upcoming exam. So, what do you think she'll have us do? The shy girl asked the boys on her sides. Logic states that it will be a tracking exercise, the ever-stoic boy answered, and Naruto found himself nodding. Yep, with your eyes, Shino's Kakaichiku and my shadow clones we make a good tracking team. He paused a bit, that or assassination and clearing. He was of course talking of bandit camps that were scattered all across the elemental nations. Quite right you are Naruto, Kurenai's voice reached them. This unit was put together with tracking in mind, and to pass this test you will have to find this. From her sleeve she took out a brown box. It was really small, barely bigger than her fist, and looked really fragile. You have to find it before lunchtime, or you will fail. Any questions? At their negative, she nodded and told them. As soon as the alarm sounds your test starts. And with that she disappeared. 10 minutes later, the bell rang. We should prepare a plan of action, Shino stated, in his monotonous voice. Naruto grinned. That was his forte. What with his pranks he was as good a planner as Shikamaru. Right then, here's the plan. Hinata. The girl looked up. You are going in the middle of the group. Use your Byakugan to watch out for traps, especially genjutsu if what I found out is true. He looked at Shino. Your condition is going to be useful now, Shino. Shino was not normal, even by Aburame standards. He didn't use sunglasses to protect his eyes like the rest of his clan, but to hide the fact he was blind. Because of that, his destruction bugs relied every kind of information to him, to compensate for his lack of sight. You will go at the back of the group, the red-tipped boy continued. Use your beetles to scout ahead. Zero on everything that may be the box, chakra, grass, dirt, anything that may give it away. I will send clones along, but right now let's stay here. Wait for the info to come, but stay on guard. From where she was watching, Kurenai had to admire the blonde-rooted boy's capacity to think. Perhaps those pranks did serve a purpose after all. It took a while for the clones and bugs to find any leads, but eventually they did. Naruto, I got 10 places with chakra and 5 with traps. The orange-fringed boy nodded and asked if he marked them. I did. The Kakaichikas are already working on the genjutsus. I got 6 traps and 5 hiding places, but they could have been caught on illusions, so we will start with the ones that have traps. He started moving. Shino, you guide. Hopefully I will be able to battle test some of the wind jutsus I know. Kurenai's ruby eyes widened. If the kid knew nature manipulation, his reports by academy instructors were incredibly wrong. How could they not write that? The group moved to the southwest, being mindful of what could be there. Hinata had her Byakugan activated, looking around for anything that may seem out of place. Shino was concentrating on all the images transmitted by the link he had with his familiars. Naruto himself was trying something Iruka Ni had taught him during the week. The same thing the man used to catch him after his pranks. The Chakrarada, a pulse of chakra sent around himself through the ground to sense any signature in the area. He believed it had been created by the Yondaime, but he could not be sure. It took them almost an hour and a half to check all the locations, and even then, most were duds and the ones that weren't were filled with flash tags. In the end they returned to the center of the training ground. Naruto and Hinata pissed at nearly being blinded, and even if he couldn't see it, Naruto could swear Shino was almost amused. When they got to the clearing at the center, they saw Kurenai in a battle-ready stance, the box dangling from her neck. A smirk crossed her face. They had already passed, but they didn't know that. I'll admit, you were faster than expected. Her smirk grew, but you haven't got this yet. Naruto charged as soon as she finished talking, intent on taking the chain across her neck. Hinata followed, reluctant but resolved to help out. Shino stayed back, sending a hive out of his body, helping them deal with any illusions. Naruto thrust a punch at the woman's chest, but she parried and quickly sent a palm to his face, knocking him off balance, and turned to block a palm from Hinata. She noticed that they had insects on their clothes and cursed. Her art was out the window. There was no way she could get past chakra-eating bugs. Naruto pushed himself off the ground, aiming a kick at Kurenai's stomach. She sidestepped and he fell onto Hinata, the two of them rolling on the ground. Before standing up fast, I expected better from you, Naruto-kun. You were the best on taijutsu in the academy. That only served to rile him up, and while he was still relatively calm, it was only a matter of time till he became sloppy. He concentrated on bringing his Kogen no Buki. If anything, it would help with his reach. He made a clone and had it attack with him. The real one only half concentrated on the battle. Hinata hadn't yet gotten up, having fainted from Naruto falling on her, so he had to mind where he stepped. He and his clone continued to attack, mixing swipes and punches and kicks in an attempt to catch the genjutsu mistress, but she only dodged, the smirk still in place. Kurenai, however, was having trouble. Shino's bugs and Naruto's constant attacks were starting to take a toll on her, and it was only a matter of time before she fell. She would have to wait the remaining 20 minutes for the second alarm to ring. A cry of "Yata!" and a flash made her snap her eyes at Naruto. The boy had somehow equipped claws, and judging by how he looked, he knew how to use them. Said boy calmed down and smirked. The falcon talons would help. Time to kick it up a notch. TT Ibeo. And he kicked off, using his weapons to slash at Kurenai. The messy-haired woman cursed again and dodged. He was getting closer, and his attacks were harder to dodge. It was only a matter of time for him to get the box. She saw a stab to her head, and made a decision. She sidestepped the attack and hit the boy on his arm, before kicking his legs from under him. He jumped and snapped a kick at his opponent, but she ducked and punched him in the seal on his stomach, throwing him away, and leaving him breathless. Shino looked at his teammates. Without them he had little chance, but he would have to try. He was about to launch a second hive and mix with it when the clock struck lunchtime, signaling the end of the exam. Naruto groaned from where he was, disappointment and discomfort clear on his face. The healing factor he got from Kurama helped in situations like this, but it was still painful having the air driven from his lungs. He got up and picked Hinata up from where she was in the ground. Then he made his way to Shino, head down, but Kurenai's voice stopped him. "And where do you think you're going, Naruto?" He looked at her, confused. "You may not have gotten the box, but that doesn't mean you didn't pass." His face and Shino's raised eyebrow made her chuckle. While this was a tracking exercise, the point wasn't that. She nodded at the girl in Naruto's arms. "Wake Hinata up and I'll explain." He shook the blue-haired girl, and heard a mumble about multicolored foxes, before she snuggled closer to his chest, making him shake harder, and she groggily opened her eyes, only blush and almost faint again after seeing how close she was to Naruto. He gently put her down, her face glowing a bright red, and looked at the woman that started speaking again. "You see, Konoha, above all else, values teamwork. Most Junin sensei's test will somehow involve teamwork. One of the most used is the bell test, but some will use a different one. I, for example, used the test to see if you could form a strategy that included the three of you, instead of going everyone by yourselves, without any help, in which case I would put you in a binding genjutsu until lunch." The three nodded, though Naruto was curious, "So because I took them too," he pointed at his sides, his arms crossed, "into account when I made the plan The bandage-covered woman nodded. "Yes, Naruto-kun, you, Shino-kun and Hinata-chan are officially genin." Naruto cheered, throwing his arms around his new teammates, making Hinata blush, but even then, she smiled, and if one were to look up the bug user's collar, they would have noticed a small smile. 3-week latter half past noon. Naruto was trying to get the hang of one of the exercises his sensei had given them, the weapon balancing. The concept was fairly simple. By using your chakra, you make any kind of cutting weapon stay balanced in the palms of your hand, but any slip on your concentration and the weapon would fall, piercing your hand. Hinata was the first to get it, because of her clan techniques, which required chakra control as perfect as it could get. Then Shino got it 2 hours late, and now, Naruto was still attempting to do it, and they had started 5 hours ago. The only redeeming quality of the day was that Kurenai-sensei had allowed him to use his shadow clones to help, and that it would make the process of calling the Falcon Talons forth faster. His training with Team 8 had consisted of chakra control, teamwork exercises and individual training, and in the afternoons they did mission, if you could call D ranks that, and after that it was free time, which Naruto used to train further with his Kikii Genkei and his Fuinjutsu, along with the bits of training Kurama gave him, which hadn't been much, only the most basic form of foxfire. He could now summon his Kogen no Buki in 45 seconds, instead of a full minute, and his mother was starting him on barrier seals. He would prefer battle seals, but that would have to wait, since those were the dark arts of seals. Almost nobody specialized on them, and those that did barely shared anything. Today was one of the few days that they didn't go on a mission, because Sensei was introducing them to one of her friends. "So, who's the brat you want me to help?" There they were. Walking alongside Kurenai was a purple-haired woman, clad in a standard Anbu armor, a sword and a cat mask at her waist, suggesting she was a swords master. Naruto thought she looked somehow familiar. The one sitting with the kunai sticking out of his hand. Indeed, due to his lack of concentration he had let the kunai drop. He idly noted the sting that the injury produced. Finally the dots connected to the young boy. He knew that woman, Neko Ne-chan. He quickly stood up and went to hug her, his arms crushing her stomach and his head snuggled to her chest. Kurenai hid her smile as she looked at the two, as amused as her other two students. Neko pinched the bridge of her nose, while she was happy to see the kid. He was still too loud for her, that and, "I told you when you were younger that if you ever saw me off duty, you were to call me Yugo." The boy only looked at her and blinked, all the while holding an innocent expression on his face. "Okay Yugo ne," and he snuggled again. Yugo looked at the boy latched onto her. "Naruto, get off. Kurenai-chan asked me to help you train with your weapon, so you have to show me good you are." "Subarashi, Ne-chan's going to train me datbeo." He started dancing around, happy that he would be seeing his Ne-chan as much as he did when he was 6. She sighed in exasperation. "Naruto, calm down and show me." Boy chuckled sheepishly, and concentrated on his bloodline. While he did this, Yugo created a reinforced shadow clone to have it test the excitable kid. When she saw the golden tools appearing, she looked at Kurenai and asked, "Those look like the ones." Kurenai interrupted her. "He is her son, it's only right that he would inherit something other than her personality." Yugo smiled and nodded. The two looked at Naruto, just in time to see the fight start. Training ground 8 noon. "Alright Naruto, I'm going to see how good you are with those." Yugo pointed at the golden claws attached to Naruto's limbs, "and then I'll come up with ways to help you train." "If you're testing me," he frowned, "then why are you a clone? Wouldn't you dispel if I hit you?" He knew the shadow clones were weak, and it couldn't be a blood clone. Those took as much time as a Mizu Bunshin to create. He should know that he had a shadow clone create a water one while he himself created a blood clone that had left him exhausted. He had stayed in his mindscape for a whole day. He hadn't tried to make another Chisio Bunshin since that incident. Yugo sighed. The boy had had 3 weeks and hadn't thought of reinforced clones. "No Naruto. When you put extra chakra in a single clone, without molding it to be an explosive one, it will take more hits to dispel. I am a reinforced clone." The boy nodded in understanding. "That would help in battles." "So I attack as if you were the original Yugo ne?" The woman nodded and lowered herself to a ready stance. Knees bent, right foot forward, left pointing outwards and her body sideways, with her sword held diagonally in front of her. Naruto did the same. His stance was pretty low, almost crouching, with his hands held one in front and the other across his stomach. His feet were digging onto the ground for faster movements. "Alright, let's start Datbeo." They stood there, waiting for the other to make the first move. But while the orange-fringed boy may have been slightly more patient thanks to meditation, he could not wait to start, so kicking off the ground, he rushed at the purple-haired woman, attempting a diagonal slash at her chest, but it was blocked by her sword. He tried to kick her, but she moved, the suddenness of it throwing him off balance, and she took advantage from it, making a stabbing move at his centrum. He moved back, but the attack still nicked him, a drop of blood flowing from the small wound. The cat Anbu spun around, slashing at her opponent, trying to cut him from shoulder to shoulder, but her attack was blocked. She narrowed her eyes and jumped over a low kick from Naruto, dropping her sword into the head of the boy, who moved his head just in time to avoid being cut, but still losing some hairs. The boy kicked high, wanting to impale his talons on the clone's neck, but the attack was parried, which left him open for a slash at his ribs, blood quickly rushing down from the wound, a grimace gracing his face. He tried a double slash with his hands, but that too was blocked. He grunted at the pressure the woman was putting on his arms, some sparks jumping from the clashing weapons. The Anbu captain kicked at his stomach, making him cross his arms in front of him, which was what the woman wanted. She started another slash, this time starting at the hip. It was dodged, but she kept attacking, her barrage leaving Naruto with the only option being to dodge. Finally the blonde managed to parry a stab from Yugo, taking advantage of the fact that the sword expert was left open. He went for a cut to her hip, only managing to cut the clothing, but he kept at it, throwing a vertical slash to her left side, but it was sidestepped. "That is the best you can do?" Naru-chan. The purpleette teased, making the blonde more frustrated. "I've cut you 3 times now, and you have only nicked me once." And it was true, he had been on the defensive for most of the mock battle. The realization hit the blonde hard, angering him and making him call on an unnoticeable amount of Kyuubi's chakra, only enough to make him slightly faster and change his eyes. He jumped, aiming for a stab at the clone, which barely blocked, having expected a slower and weaker charge. The clone looked at the boy's face and gasped at the blue-turned red eyes. The red-tipped boy did a roundhouse kick, the talons nicking the clone on the waist, and used the momentum for a straight kick. The woman jumped back, before rushing at the angry boy, the sword tip on the ground, before bringing it up to a cut in the chest of the kid, making blood jump from the wound. Naruto collapsed to his knees, before falling to the ground, the falcon talons disappearing as soon as he hit the ground. Hinata was at his side in seconds, turning him over, and started applying her healing salve, sealing the wounds even faster than they normally would. The clone dispelled, sending the encounter to the original, who held her head when the memory hit her. "Well, I got what I needed from him, I'll start planning his training tomorrow." Kurenai frowned at her friend. "Did you have to be so rough on him? The last slash could have maimed him." She was worried for the kid. She didn't exactly how far his healing went, and she didn't really want to find out. It was necessary, the purple-haired woman started, aware of the look the raven-haired sensei was giving her. He was starting to channel the beast's chakra. Had I not knocked him out, he would have gone berserk. Kurenai's ruby-colored eyes widened. Her student had called on that power. Yugo's voice brought her out of her thoughts. I don't think it was a conscious thing. Remember how my clone taunted him? She nodded. My best guess is that his annoyance at being called Naru-chan, coupled with his frustration at constantly being on the defensive and only cutting the clone once, made him subconsciously call on it. The messy-haired woman sighed. Guess I'll have to put more time into meditation. She looked at her longtime friend. How do you plan on training him? I'm going to take him 3 times a week. During the time you are teaching them hand-to-hand combat. Yugo closed her eyes. He is skilled for his age. Hell, I doubt anyone his age can use those things. She opened her eyes and gazed at the fallen boy. Does he know his elements? She asked. Yes, Kurenai answered. Wind and water. He knows a few jutsus too. She looked at her team. Shino had moved and was now helping Hinata to move the unconscious boy to the shade of a tree. I'm going to test their affinity soon. See if they have one. Yugo nodded, and the two went to the kids. 30 minutes later, Naruto woke up uncomfortable, feeling a bit stiff from where his Nei-chan had cut him. So, Soki, what did you learn today? Kushina's voice made him groan, the memory of his spar with Yugo still fresh. To never fight someone better if I can help it, it had tired him too. Yugo Nei was obviously better than Kurenai-sensei. She was more aggressive too. And that you should never piss off a woman that can wield a weapon, Kurama said sagely, nodding at his own words inside the seal. To always stay calm in battle would be a better advice, Tt Ibeo. He opened his eyes and sat up, wincing slightly as a wave of pain hit him. He looked around, noticing 4 blurry figures. He blinked and rubbed his eyes, finally able to distinguish his team, Yugo Nei and Kurenai-sensei. Mo, Oni-chan is mean. He pouted, his eyes watering. Just as Yugo was about to speak, he continued, every trace of the pout gone. So, Nei-chan, when do you start my training? Am I going to learn to use the sword too? Yugo sighed again. The blonde-rooted boy hadn't lost his energy, like I told Kurenai. You will be training with me 3 times a week, during the time you are practicing taijutsu. She looked at his new apprentice, although, if, and only if, you manage to master those claws of yours, I'll teach you swordsmanship. Yata, I'm going to be so awesome, Tt Ibeo. A punch to the top of his head made him face plant. Baka, mastering a weapon can take years. I'm surprised you got as good as you are with the one you use as young as you are. The purple-haired woman helped him stand up again. Finish what you were doing before I came, and Naruto, we start tomorrow. With that she shunshined out of the training ground. The next day 10 am. An excited Naruto was standing before an exasperated Yugo. He was practically vibrating with excitement. Naruto, calm down. She told him, we won't start anything until after you condition your body. The boy pouted, your claws, talon, or whatever you call them, rely on speed and maneuverability. So unless you are fast and agile, they are little else than knives. She chuckled at his looks, probably outraged at his bloodline being compared to normal weapons. What I want you to do is to run as fast as you can, around the training ground until you can't run anymore. Almost like the time you broke into the Anbu compound for a prank. And so he did. With a groan he went, running into the tree line and to circle the fence surrounding their training ground. It would be almost an hour when he collapsed in front of an amused Yugo, who had a smile at seeing the normally hyper boy panting on the ground. You have 10 minutes to rest, then we start another exercise. The boy could only groan. The next exercise was fairly simple. Dodge all the balls thrown at him. Easy, right? Not quite. Yugo was ruthless, throwing them at speeds he could barely follow, and mixing the height as low as his shins and as high as his forehead, almost never aiming at the same spot. Needless to say, by the end of the day, he was sore, with bruises all over his body, and left with a sense of disappointment at not having learned anything. 4 weeks later 2 petameters. Team 8 was standing in front of the Hokage, giving a report of a successful mission. Or at least, Kurenai was. Naruto was staring at the end of the universe. Hinata was poking her fingers together, stealing glances at Naruto and Shino, the later remaining as still and silent as ever. Very well Kurenai-chan, I'll give your team AC rank. The heads of the trio immediately snapped to the aged leader. He was giving them a higher mission. A few days ago a farmer came asking for help at setting up his farm. Naruto groaned. More chores. Oh well, at least he would be getting out of the village for a while. You must set the fence where he tells you, and then help him escort the animals needed to his farm. The aged leader looked at the team across the desk, and he mentally chuckled at the look Naruto was giving him. Alright you three, I want you to pack for at least a week, 2 at the most, Kurenai told her pupils. Meet me in 2 hours at the western. She looked at the Hokage for confirmation. At his nod she continued, at the western gate, don't be late. After her dismissal, the 3 members of Team 8 went their ways, each of them thinking of their upcoming mission. West Gate 4 meters. Kurenai arrived a few minutes after the rest of her squad, to find them checking their equipment, Hinata almost hiding in her backpack, Shino with his hand inside his own pack, and Naruto sealing and unsealing things from a scroll. Alright you three, you have everything you need? At their nods she smiled. Good then let's get going. Hopefully we can make it before sunset. Susamaji, I'm going out of Konoha, thought the hyperactive boy. Calm down Soki, remember what I've told you. The outside world is very different from the interior of the village walls, his Ka-chan told him, as she had many times before, every time he went to hunt. I know Ka-chan, but I can't help but feel excited. It's the first time I've went out for something other than hunting, and it was true. He rarely ever left the walls, only to train, which left him still relatively close to the walls, and to hunt, for which he only went a mile of the village. Listen to Kushina, she may be a worrywart, but she means well. Shortly after saying that, Kurama was hit over the head by an angry mother. Who are you calling worrywart, Ttebane? Kushina never tolerated teasing, not even from her late husband, so everyone who messed with her did it at their own risk. Ka-chan, if you're going to hit Kurama then wait till the link is cut, Naruto grumbled. You're going to give me a headache. He got no response, meaning she had cut the mind link in order to beat the kitsune to a pulp. He pitied the poor guy. His sensei's voice brought him out of his conversation. Good we're here. That's what he hated of the link. It made time seem faster than it really was. Let's go to the house, and tell them we've arrived. The house was pretty big, with a height of 3 stories, and if he was right, at least 4 rooms per floor. It had a barn attached to the back, probably so they could access the animals more easily when they were brought in. His teacher knocked the door, and after a few moments it was opened by a man in his late 30s. I suppose you are the team they sent? At Kurenai's nod he smiled. Good, good, please come in. I've been waiting for you. Didn't expect kids quite as young though. He glanced at the 3 teens. Almost no one does, Mr. Hokkaido Noman, he quickly told her. Yuhi Kurenai, the boy with multicolored hair is Uzumaki Naruto. The one with the high collar is Aburame Shino and the blue-haired one is Hyuga Hinata. She motioned to her team, each of them nodding when their name was said. Now, could you please give us a better description of what you want us to do, Hokkaido-san? Yes, of course, Yuhi-san. The man invited them to sit down. They did. From some time I've been saving in order to start this farm. But no matter where I went I couldn't find someone willing to make the fence, even if I already have the materials ready. So I asked your cage for help. Especially since the cows and sheep I ordered will get here by next week, so I just could not wait for someone to help. So you want us to do what others didn't want to? Kurenai interrupted. Don't worry, we'll have the fence ready in time to escort the animals. You don't have to worry. Thank you, Kurenai-san, Hokkaido told them. Now I believe it's time for dinner. Please, join us. Team 8 didn't want to intrude, seeing as they had their own provisions, but they didn't want to seem rude either, so they followed Noman to the dining room. Noman led them away from the living room and to a large room that was rather spacious. Not only that, but it was also heavily decorated, with pictures, portraits and sculptures everywhere. Nins. Please meet my wife, Utsukushi. He motioned to a woman that obviously kept herself in good condition, with a kind face, light brown hair and hazel eyes, and my son, Gankona. He pointed to a kid, probably 7, who was staring at them with an inquisitive face, obviously wondering who they were. Pleased to meet you, Utsukushi-san, Gankona-san. I hope we aren't intruding, Kurenai told the woman. Oh no, not at all, the woman replied. She was obviously accustomed to having guests. Please do sit down, I was about to serve dinner. The dish she served was a simple mushroom soup, that did not make it any less appreciated by the Konoha nin. Hey, Why do you have so many tattoos? Gankona asked Naruto, who motioned to wait a bit, since he was chewing a particularly difficult shroom. Well, he swallowed and started talking. The ones on my hands and arms are storage seals, so I don't have to carry so much stuff all the time. He pointed at his chest and then at his wrists. This ones are weight, so I'm always training my strength, and this too. He showed the ones on his palms, or so I can launch needles better. Sugoi, Gankona breathed, and what of the one you have on your stomach? It looks funny. He was talking of his Jinchuriki seal, that was a spiral with 4 wiggly lines coming from it. Ah well, he scratched the back of his head, that one's a bit special, he sighed, it marks me as a sacrifice for the betterment of the village. The farmers gasped, the kid was to be sacrificed? It means that I was chosen as the, he hesitated, cage, yes cage, of a very dark power, and I have to keep it inside of me, so it doesn't injure anybody. So you are basically like one of the shrines of Oni no Kuni? Noman asked him, you hold something back? He was curious, he had heard of demon containers, but he had never heard of a living one. Yeah, you could say that. Though I wish Ka-chan wasn't trapped, the last part was left unspoken. Me too Soki, but we have to wait for a way to get us out without killing you. Kurama nodded in agreement. Even though he didn't see it, he could feel it. Odorakubeki, you're like a hero or something. Naruto smiled both wistfully and in amusement, if only the villagers could see it like that. The rest of the night was spent talking, Kurenai about the mission and Naruto with the younger boy about whatever came to mind. The next day. Alright team, Hokkaido-san told us to make the fence a mile out in every direction. The members of Team 8 were holding a shovel, a mace, and a stack of wooden poles each. Today you are going to start digging the holes and starting the north side of the fence. You'll have 2 breaks, one at lunchtime and another 2 hours before dinner. The 3 genin nodded. I'll be using shadow clones to keep an eye on you, so no slacking off. The young genin left in the same general direction, but during the way they decided that they should start each on a different part. Shino would start from the east to the center, where he would meet with Naruto, who would do the western and eastern center, while Hinata would do the east part of the section, and so, the team separated. Naruto's part. The blonde-rooted boy was currently in trying to move a rock that he had found on where he started to dig. It wouldn't be so bad, had the rock not been so big and heavy. So he, along with a pair of clones, were digging out the rock, so they would just have to roll it out of the hole. Hey, boss, how the hell did this get here? Clone number 1 asked. How should I know? For all I care we could just blow to Kingdom Come, Naruto replied. Then why don't we? Clone number 2 whined. Because, boss forgot to bring the ink for seal drawing. Clone number 3 was a flux on the technique. A clone that had developed a different personality. And he can't use blood because? Number 1 formed a hand seal, you know what? Forget it, I'm just blowing the damn thing up with me, and he exploded, popping the other 2 clones, causing a cave-in, and launching the original to the skies. He would awaken from his landing 30 minutes later, and start making Cage Bunshin to dig and impale the poles, while he himself nailed planks to connect them. Hinata's part. The Blue Net, being a member of the Hyuga clan, used her Byakugan to see where the best places to put the poles were, and started doing her part of the job, occasionally wiping a thread of sweat when they appeared. Shino's part. The stoic boy could be seen with the shovel in his hands, adjusting it many times, before he would dig the hole and plant the stake, repeating the process until he deemed enough and connected them with planks. Kurenai. She had to say, she was proud of her students. Sure, they weren't the most normal of the bunch, a shy heiress, a quiet blind boy, and a hyperactive Jinchuriki. They were kids, innocent to the ways of the world. The only one that was not so naive was probably Naruto. The poor boy had been alone most of his life, abused both orally and emotionally. Hopefully he would stay just as he was right now, and not snap and kill them all. She could only wonder what would have happened had his mother lived. Would he be different? Would he take even more after her? Would he even be a ninja? She did not let those thoughts get to her. For all intents and purposes she was their family now. She would help them become the very best they could be. 6 days later. It had taken Team 8 the best part of the week, but they had done it. They had finished setting up the perimeter of the farm, and now they would go escort the caravan of animals that would inhabit the barn. We probably won't encounter anything more than a couple of bandits at the most, Kurenai told her team as they were setting off from the town. Noman was at the front of the caravan, carrying his son on his shoulder. The boy looking around in wonder. Still, keep your guard up. You know the formation? She asked her team, who nodded. Right, then get to your positions. The formation had Hinata walking at the back of the convoy, Naruto and Shino at the sides and Kurenai-sensei at the front with Nomen. Naruto would create 6 clones and had them walk around the animals, keeping an eye on the spots Hinata couldn't reach with her eyes, and generally messing with the cows. They hadn't really seen anything that gave them any real trouble, a wolf seeking food over here, a cow or sheep wandering off, and the occasional bear that crossed their path. All in all, it seemed rather like a vacation more than anything. That evening, "Thank you for helping us setting up," Nomen was telling them when they reached the farm. "I don't think the fence would be finished had you not come." "No worries, Hokkaido-san, it is our job to help, after all," the Genjutsu mistress replied. "Still, thank you for doing." He was interrupted by the cry of a hawk overhead, before said hawk landed on the arm of the sensei of Team 8. She took the scroll attached to the creature's leg, before sending it back to where it came from. Her eyebrows marred into a frown when she read the message, before her eyes widened. "Sorry Hokkaido-san, we will have to leave earlier than expected." She called for her team, and when they arrived she set off, the kids hesitating before catching up. "Hokage-sama assigned us to a flash mission." Without glancing back she started to explain. "A flash mission is one that has to be taken care of right after it is requested. Normally, the only to be considered for that are the A ranks and S ranks, but occasionally, a lower-ranking mission is made. Flash." She glanced back at her students, her expression grim. "We have been assigned to take care of a group of bandits that recently attacked an unprotected village. They razed it to the ground and kidnapped what few survivors there were. This is what the team was meant to be for, a cleaning mission." She looked forward again, praying to whatever deity there was that her children wouldn't change much from the experience. Team 8 was immersed each in their own thoughts, thinking about the upcoming task. Eliminating a camp full of bandits, meaning they would have to kill. They had expected it, but they didn't think it would be so soon. "I have to trust them, besides, if they break down I'll be there to help." Despite repeating this to herself, Kurenai could not help but think that it would scar them more than what was necessary. "Logic told me I would have to do it eventually. I would prefer to do it with Tu-san and Ka-san nearby though, in truth." The young Aburame was scared. What if he liked it? What if he couldn't cope with it? He wouldn't like to cause grief to his family and friends, but what would happen to him after this? "I don't want to kill. I don't like hurting people." The young Hyuga was probably faring the worst out of the 4. Her gentle disposition was both her greatest advantage and her weakest point. She was everything a Hyuga was not supposed to be. The problem came from the fact that, while not physically, she had been abused emotionally, which led to a very meek personality. Maybe she wouldn't be like that had her clan believed in her. Right now, the poor girl was an emotional wreck, and would probably faint at the simplest of surprises. "I'll have to kill." I knew it was coming, but damn, Naruto had been prepared. His mother had given him the task of raising a rabbit and killing it after it was mature enough, to help drive the shock of killing out of the red-tipped boy. "Soki, just remember, you have me, you have Kurama, and you have your team. We'll all help you go through it." Kushina was worried for her son. She knew his will was strong as hers and his father's, but killing was known to bring down even the strongest of minds, despite their attempts at making it easier to bear. "Kit, the only thing you need to remember is to stay calm, otherwise my chakra may leak. Other than that, the only advice I can give is just do it." Kurama never was like most demons. He was childish, he was immature, and he didn't like bloodlust. Some might say that he was born a human and corrupted by the power given to him, and in a way it was true. When he first got his power, he started every fight he could, but though the centuries of his existence, he had watched as humans killed each other, and slowly came to hate the act of ever wasting blood. Granted, he had done it a few times before being sealed, but he never killed innocents if he could help it. The kid knew that as ninjas they would have to kill, especially considering how their team was made. Opinions didn't matter as long as the mission was complete and your comrades safe. Kurenai stopped, making her charges do the same. She pointed at the camp, some tents scattered about and a wooden palisade surrounding them, and asked, "Hinata, what do you see?" The girl activated her eyes, veins bulging, and concentrated on the tent's bellow. There are around 60 signatures moving. Oh, only 2 of them get past academy level. One a chunin, the other genin. "Do you see where the captured people are?" High, on the shack outside the hurdle. She pointed to a place on the side northern end. That's where the G-Genin signature is. The Chunin one is on the west end. The red-eyed woman considered her words. She could take care of the Chunin level 1 easily, while the rest of her team took care of the camp. Shino, you will enter on the south, and start moving toward the center. Hinata, the same with you in the east. Naruto, you enter through the shack. Eliminate the bandit there. Leave a clone with the prisoners and then move inwards. I'll take the west. She sighed. Here, take this. The comm pieces we use when catching Tora. She handed them a headset, which they out on. If anything happens, tell me. One advised, just don't think about it until we are alone, closed her eyes, and when she opened them, they weren't looking at their sensei, they were looking at an experienced team leader. Move out, she said, and disappeared, the others soon going their ways. Western sector of the camp. Kurenai arrived in a shunshin, behind a group of drunken bandits, stumbling their way through others, sometimes tripping. She used a genjutsu to immobilize them, before swiftly killing them with accurate shuriken throws. Thuds signifying their fall to the ground, blood rushing from their wounds. Just as she was about to go off and surge, her instincts screamed and she jumped, just in time to miss being impaled by a sword. Well, it seems that you managed to dodge, Satsugai Shaw. I had hoped you wouldn't. Next to the sword there was a man in his 20s, a smirk in place. Eyes ogling at Kurenai's figure. I don't suppose you could come with me. We would have a great time. The man was 6 feet 4 inches, with brown hair, hazel eyes and a figure of someone who practiced every once in a while. Kurenai narrowed her eyes at the man. Baringa Kuroshi, she muttered. A B-rank missing nin from Takigakure. A bit troubling, considering she didn't have a weapon but her kunai and shuriken, while he had a sword. His reach was bigger, and he probably knew how to dispel illusions. Still, Megan. Jigoku no Shicho. Forming hand seals, she put him under one of her easiest genjutsus, and rushed at him. Kunai at the ready. Kuroshi brought his hands up, and dispelled the technique. But Kurenai was already upon him, slashing with her weapon of choice. He blocked and kicked her feet, but she performed a jump and kicked at his side, hearing the satisfying crunch of a broken rib. The missing nin grunted and pushed her away, before preparing his own jutsu, Doden, Doro no Kawa. He announced before spiting a large stream of mud at the genjutsu mistress, forcing her to dodge. He ended the technique and charged, sword at his side. Kurenai blocked his slash, and put him in a false surrounding illusion when he looked at her in the eyes. Kuroshi saw the woman he was fighting disappear, and whirled around, expecting an attack. When it didn't come he narrowed his eyes, before raising his hands to the ram seal. Before he could, however, a pain in his right hand caused him to drop his sword, and his perception to become normal again. Kurenai had moved from where she was standing as soon as her shui no nis took effect, disengaging from the stalemate, and slashed the dominant hand of her opponent, making him drop the sword. This, however, had the side effect of raising him from the illusion. She ducked under an enraged punch, followed by rolling to the side of a falling kick, and lashed out to the closest target, that just so happened to be the back of his knee, making him fall to the ground. Just as she was about to pierce his chest in order to kill him, Kuroshi made a few hand signs and whispered, Kaden. Jiko Bakuhatsu. Before he exploded in a ball of flames, intent of taking the bitch who defeated him with him. Kurenai barely had the time to do a substitution. Eastern side of the compound. Hinata was quietly sneaking around, slashing the throats of the bandits that were unaware. Tears were running down her face, the weight of what she was doing fully registering on her mind. Occasionally someone would see her, before being silenced by a juken strike to the heart, effectively killing them by a heart attack. But about halfway to the center a guard saw her, and she couldn't reach him before he shouted the alarm. Seconds later an explosion was seen, followed by a near unbearable amount of killing intent bathed the camp. She did the only thing she could think about. Run. Southern sector. Shino was using a combination of his bugs and throwing weapons to dispose of every bandit he found. If one were to see him, they would think him the perfect shinobi, calm in the face of death. But in reality he was soaking the interior of his coat with sweat, and a grimace was plastered on his face, showing his not-so-obvious discomfort at having to kill. He was finishing off a particularly stubborn bandit when he heard the explosion, before being shocked still when the killing intent washed upon him. On the back of his mind he registered that the man that was giving him problems dropped to the floor. Northern sector. Naruto was in his element. The shadows had been his refuge when he played a prank or when a mob formed to hurt him. He was a creature of the shadows, moving without seeing, only sensing the things around him. He sneaked past several low-class bandits, drunks that were on the verge of slipping into an alcohol-induced coma, towards the small shack where Hinata had told him the captives were held. At the back of his mind he was hoping to get a fight before he had to kill, which would help him deal with the stress of the deed. He was about to make it to the door of the shack when he was bombarded by a rain of explosive kunai, making him jump back from his position. "Well, look at what we got here," an arrogant voice reached his ears, making him raise his head and prepare his falcon talons. The owner of said voice was a man in his late teens, with dark hair, dark blue eyes, wore a piece of what could only be stolen armor, and black pants. "I wonder, how could you sneak until here without being detected?" The man asked. "That is none of your business, Datbeo," the hyperactive boy answered. "Oh my, snappy aren't we?" He chuckled, before growing serious and throwing more explosives at the boy, who dodged them and responded in kind. The man jumped from his perch on top of the house to dodge, only to move out of the way of a kunai-wielding hand attempting to skewer him. The man, let's all call him Beagles, flipped back, making seals along the way. When he landed he let his jutsu fly, Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu, out of his mouth came a giant fireball, heading straight at Naruto. Naruto cursed. If it weren't for the fact that he wanted his talons out as fast as possible he would have performed a Suiten technique, but as it was, the only technique he could use were his shadow clones. He created 10 of them, substituting himself with a log to a nearby tree, and watched Beagles fight the cloned while he concentrated on his bloodline. Beagles cursed when he saw the clones appear. He knew they were real when one pushed another out of the way, and prepared for what he knew would be deathmatch. He ducked under a punch and lashed out to the clone that attacked him, only for him to snap his arm back when a kunai came close. A clone threw a kick that overextended, and Beagles capitalized on that, throwing a shuriken at the crotch. He winced when it hit. The clone may be his opponent, but he didn't wish on anyone that fate. The fight now reduced to 9-on-1. He made a kawarimi, and prepared another jutsu, Kaden. Hinotama Renpatsu. He spit a fireball upwards, said fireball divided 10 feet off the ground, and fell on 4 unlucky clones. He threw shuriken after shuriken, managing to dispel another clone, before he was engaged on a 4-on-1 battle. A clone hit him on the shoulder, almost dislocating it, before he received a kick on the thighs. He snapped his arm to the clone on his right, hitting him on the neck. Beagles jumped over a low kick, lashing backwards, but his kick was caught and he suffered a cut on his sheen, before nailing the clone with another kick, this one hitting head-on. The lost 2 clones charged and he weaved between strikes, throwing a kunai that caught each on the head. His instincts screamed and he rolled to the side, finding a clawed foot falling where he was. Naruto, the original one, went in for a stab that was parried, before slashing with his other hand, which was blocked by a kunai. He disengaged, backpedaling, and waited. He assessed the damage his clones had inflicted. His opponent had a 2 wound on his leg, 1 on the arm, and his clothes were cut to ribbons. He blocked a kunai charge, and snapped his left leg upwards, attempting a horizontal slash at the chest. The attempt was barely dodged, thin lines of red flowing slowly down the slashed top on Beagles. Without waiting for a counterattack, he threw his leg downwards, and used the momentum to carry him for a double cut. Beagles knew he couldn't win. The brat that had confronted him had too much energy. The 10 clones were proof of that. He didn't look winded at all. And then there were those weird glowing claws of his. The damn things had made an already hard battle into an almost impossible one. He just didn't have anything that could help him against them. He could try another jutsu, but that would mean leaving himself without chakra to help stop the bleeding of his injuries. He tried to block the upcoming X-shaped cut, only to feel a searing pain where his arms were. He lifted them to his face, only to find a pair of bloody stumps where his forearms used to be. Just as Beagle was about to scream, a blade found his neck, cutting his windpipe, just before he saw the world spin and the ground to come closer. Naruto stood still as he watched Beagle's head fall to the ground with a thud. As if on cue, when the corpse fell, he vomited. He threw up everything he had eaten in the day. After several minutes of dry heaving, he moved to the shack, smashing the door with his talons, that he dematerialized immediately afterwards. What he saw brought him out of his post-kill shock, and into another kind of shock, one of anger. Men, women and children were all lying inside cages. Their clothes were mostly rags, blood and dirt smearing them. The floor of the cages was incredibly dirty with feces and blood. But what made him almost give in to his rage was a single girl. Probably a year younger than Konohamaru, the poor girl was tied to a wall, the rags covering her even bloodier than the ones he saw on the people inside the cages. Her eyes were swollen shut, and every visible part of her body was purple. Lastly, some red lines were visible from the gashes on her clothes. He made a clone and had set up a clean space where the girl could rest, while he untied her and applied some of the healing salve Hinata had given everyone on the team, before taking her to the clone. He laid her down where the clone pointed, and said, "Stay with her, especially if she wakes up. If anybody wakes up, give them a flask." He unsealed all the salve he had. "Do not dispel, no matter what happens." When the clone nodded, afraid of what the boss could do when angry, Naruto walked out the door. "Soki, calm down. I know you're angry, and I'm too, but don't let it get to you." He vaguely heard his mother speak, but it was really low. "Kit, calm the hell down. If you don't you'll go into a rampage, again." Even with his booming voice, Kurama was barely heard. He jumped the wall surrounding the camp, and let his rage be announced with an unearthly roar, his body covered by a flame like chakra. Kurenai cursed when she heard a roar that could only mean her student had been angered, and cursed again when the oppressive killing intent washed over her, immobilizing every bandit around her. "Shino, Hinata, you had to get out of the camp, now," she shouted to the intercom, unknowingly snapping the former out of his stupor and the later to run faster. It would be 5 minutes later when her students, minus Naruto, appeared, and another 10 for the key to banish. Back with Naruto. Naruto had changed. His hair was now a bloody red color, as were his eyes. His hands and feet had grown claws instead of nails. His head became more pronounced and his whiskers darker, making him look much like a humanized, red, snarling fox. With another roar he charged at the tents in front of him, slashing at everything that dared get on his path of destruction. His hands snapped to the right, piercing the chest of a paralyzed bandit. He charged chakra to his throat, before realizing it with a scream, launching everything he could see backwards, men dying when they fell on their necks. The second roar had the side effect of waking the bandits of their shocks, making them charge at the threat, intent on eliminating him, but every single one of them met bloody ends. He spun around, hand in the air, and cut open the armed men that were trying to surround him, blood and guts falling from the gashes. A tail grew out of the chakra surrounding him. He jumped forward and rolled, his new tail acting as a whip to smash anything it touched. 15 minutes into his rampage the last of the bandits fell, and with him the cloak around Naruto. Team 8. Naruto found his teammates huddled into their sensei, and flinched a bit, knowing it was him that caused them to be like that. "The camp is destroyed," he said with a hollow voice that made his sensei flinch. "The captives are with a clone of mine. I'll lead you there." Kurenai stood up slowly, careful of staying close to her shivering students, and followed the new redhead, though he still had a spot of orange on top of his head. "What happened, Naruto?" Kurenai asked. "We felt a powerful presence not too long ago." Naruto was quiet for a moment, before answering in the same monotone. "They had a kid, tied up to a wall. I helped her, and left the house being watched by a clone." He looked down. "She had been tortured," I snapped. That was what she had feared. She should have sent Shino or Hinata, but he was the strongest of the three, and she had been sure he wouldn't let his emotions get the best of him. They walked in silence after that, Kurenai thinking of the repercussions her decision could bring. They arrived to the shack with the broken door, Naruto dispelling the clone and moving to the side of the little girl he had rescued. The effects of the salve he had applied were already apparent. Her skin was already darkening and becoming less upset. He moved closer, putting her head on his lap while rubbing her scalp. He stared at nothing, his thoughts on what he had done. Willingly or driven by rage, he had killed more than 3 dozens of people, despicable people, but people nonetheless. He glanced down to the girl resting on his lap. He didn't really know why, but he was feeling protective of the child. It probably was because of how his childhood was. He was alone most of his early years, and even when he met his mother and Kurama he was lonely at times. He decided then that he would protect the kid, take her to Konoha if she was an orphan and adopt her. The rest of Team 8 had been working on releasing the captives and waking them up, before giving them a flask of healing salve and helping them get outside, telling them to wait. Kurenai laid a hand on the redhead's shoulder. "Everyone is outside, we're moving out," she told him. He nodded, and with care lifted her to a bridal carry. Naruto was still a storm of emotions when the group of 4 ninja and 90 people stopped for the night. Anger, at the bandits that stole these people's lives. Pity, because they had lost what they had. Self-anger, that he had lost control badly enough to go berserk. Compassion towards the girl on his arms. And sadness that he hadn't heard from his Ka-chan or Kurama since then. During the time it took to get from the now destroyed camp to the small clearing they now were, Naruto had taken to asking questions about the girl. What her name was. Did somebody know her? Was she liked? Most people had answered no to the questions, and the ones that didn't had only seen her by passing, so he could only assume she was an orphan. Kurenai-sensei had told them to get food. It was now half an hour later. He had made clones and had them gather berries and game animals. Hinata and Shino had gone for water to a stream nearby. The berries the clones had brought were now finished. Every single one had been eaten. The rabbits, hares and squirrels the clones had caught were roasting over a fire. The ex-captives were eyeing them with hunger. They probably weren't fed in there. He had applied more salve to the girl that was still sleeping. Her injuries were now mostly superficial, a few bruises and scrapes. She was still dirty though, so the only thing he could tell was that she was a few months younger than Konohamaru. He grabbed 2 animals from the fire, sealing one to give it to the girl when she awakened. He really had to give her a name, he couldn't just call her girl, and starting to nibble on the other, savoring the flavor. He hadn't eaten hare in months and he was starting to miss the taste. He went to his tent shortly after finishing the whole animal, the child still close to him. He missed the hopeful look on his team's girl, the sad glance from his teacher and the slightly unnerved look he got from the Aburame. He unsealed a small futon from one of the few scrolls he actually carried and laid on one side, the small child he had carried on the other side. He lied awake for a long time, before finally succumbing to his sleep. Unfortunately he would awaken many times during the night, never sleeping for more than an hour at a time and always closer to the girl he had saved. The next morning, Naruto awoke yet again without breath, panting and sweating after experiencing the same carnage from another perspective. He had awoken many times during the night because of the same nightmare, the carnage he was responsible of seeing from an outsider point of view. He sat there, cover pulling at his hips, panting and staring off 100 yards, the previous night replaying on his mind. The only good thing was that he would probably get a little sister. He glanced at his low right. The poor thing had snuggled close to him during the night, in between his episodes. She was still covered in dirt and blood, but it was mostly dry and the only injury he could see was a gash on her shoulder, but that was scabbed already. It would probably fall off in a week, a day or two if he used what little salve he had, something he didn't want to use, not yet at least. He reluctantly got up and out of the tent, leaving a clone in case the girl woke up and wanted an explanation. He was the only one awake. The men and women they released from their cages were either sleeping inside tents or close to their couples. It was refreshing in a way. These people had lost their home, yet acted as if though this was just a camping trip. He wished he was still naive, able to sleep without nightmares. It had lessened after his 5th birthday, the night he met his mother. The past night his sleep was restless. The seal had blocked to allow time for his body to get used to Yuki still coursing through him, so he couldn't hear his mother singing a lullaby, nor could he hug Kurama's body close to him. He moved through the forest, once again hunting for food. His clones had set up traps last night. He would collect the catches still there and catch whatever he could before heading back to camp. Maybe he would start with the Rasengan training. He had brought some water balloons to start it during the breaks at the farm. But the construction of the fence had been more tiring than he had thought, and the flash assault on the bandit stronghold had left no time. About 4 dozen small animals had fallen for the traps, of them only 20 were still intact. A few early birds had met their ends by a well-placed shuriken and their eggs would become part of the breakfast. He had been lucky enough to spot a deer. He was dragging the corpse back to the tents. He would skin it on the stream that was close to the clearing they stayed for the night. By the time he was done, Kurenai-sensei was starting another fire. Shino and Hinata were still inside their tents. What little sleep they had managed to catch would probably leave them soon. How did you sleep, Naruto-kun? Kurenai-sensei asked him. Silence was her answer. She sighed. If it helps any, try to think what would have happened to them. She motioned to the fast asleep former captives. Had you not done what you did? Naruto's still red bangs shadowed his eyes. But what good is it when I lose control like I did back there? He growled. Had anyone other than that scum? The last word was spit out of his mouth. Been there. I would have killed them too. A sob escaped him. I could barely think straight. The only thing on my head was how to make them pay for what they had done. A tear fell from his eyes. What good am I when I let my bloodlust control me? For the first time since that fateful night when he met his tenants, Naruto cried for something other than happiness. The tears that were now flowing down his face were tears of frustration and self-loathing. Kurenai moved to embrace her student, holding him while he cried his frustrations away. It would help him. He had probably bottled up everything until now, showing nothing but that smile he wore inside the village. They would stay there for almost an hour, and even though they wouldn't realize it till months later, but that would be when Naruto started seeing Kurenai as a sister rather than just his sensei. 2 hours later, Naruto was finally starting his Rasengan training. The past week he had finished every Futon and Suiten technique he had copied from the Forbidden Scroll. That elevated his jutsu arsenal to 8 Futon and 14 Suiten. The spiraling sphere was just that. A sphere of pure chakra spinning so fast it looked as if though it was a whirlpool encased on a ball. The ultimate chakra form manipulation technique, and it was yet to be completed. The whole training was divided on 3 parts: control, power and shape. The first stage, control, was about popping a water balloon using your chakra to move the water inside it. Move it to slow and the balloon doesn't pop. Move it to fast and the only thing that happens is the balloon deforming. The whole point was to move it at the right speed on multiple directions. Kuso. The problem was that this damn thing only breaks. It was hard to concentrate on both speed and direction. The stupid balloon just doesn't stay together long enough to pop. Ttebeo. That and Naruto had overloaded the balloons with water, so they were almost as big as his head instead of his fist, but he didn't know that. So frustrated, he went to his tent to meditate. There was only one problem, in the form of a little girl. Anyo, why are there 2 of you? 10 minutes earlier, Naruto's tent. She woke up feeling strangely well and in a soft place. That was the first sign something had gone either extremely right or extremely wrong. Last thing she remembered was getting tied up to the cross the shack she was in had. Then she remembered pain, and then she passed out, so something had happened to her. Her breath hitched. Had she been beaten so bad she died? But, so you're awake. Her eyes snapped open and she looked to her right. I expected you to wake in the afternoon, though it's good you woke up now. A boy of 13 years, with red-orange hair, whiskers on his cheeks and purple eyes was staring at her, a tender smile on his face. He was holding something to her. Here, eat this. She looked at it, fear and nervousness on her face. Don't worry, it's food, meat. She eyed him. Fine. Look. He took a bite of the animal he was holding and offered it to her again. See, it's okay, if a bit dry. She warily took it and, with an almost excruciating amount of caution, took a bite. Immediately her face lit up and she dug in. 5 minutes later there were only bones left. Where am I? She asked after finishing the rabbit, not that she knew what it was. Who are you? Indeed, the boy had not introduced himself. Me? I'm Uzumaki Naruto Datbeo. He introduced himself with a thumb up and a grin. The nice guy pose. And you're on my futon, in my tent, on a camp we made last night. Her expression changed from happy to confused. She had been on a camp before. Last night my team and I got into the bandit camp you were in and got you and the rest out. His voice broke her out of her thoughts. You were on a particularly bad shape, had to use most of the healing salve my teammate gave to me on you. He chuckled. I guess I should have used a bit less. You're almost as good as new. Thanks for helping me. The girl bowed. I don't think we could have gotten out of there on ourselves. Naruto grinned at her, a different grin from his introduction. That one had been a goofy one. This one was a proud one. No problem. I did got paid to do it. He frowned, not that I wouldn't have done anyway. She looked at the flap of the tent and saw a boy that looked identical to the one she was talking to. Anyo. Why are there 2 of you? The Narutos looked at each other and back at her. I'm a clone. They said in perfect unison. She looked at them, bewildered. A clone? Yep, he is made out of my chakra. The redhead that just entered the tent continued. As if reading her thoughts, for all intents and purposes we are pretty much the same. The original looked at his clone and said, "You can dispel now, I'll take it from here." The clone did as told and disappeared on a puff of smoke. "Well then, I don't suppose you have a name?" Naruto smiled at her abashed expression. "Megumi, my name is Megumi sir," she told him. Naruto frowned and said, "Don't call me, sir, I'm at least 20 years too young to be a, sir," he snorted. "Whatever, do you want to go clean up? You're pretty dirty after all." At her nod he led her outside the tent and to the stream he had cleaned the deer on. 3 hours later, the large group was once again moving through the forests that formed the Land of Fire. Megumi was riding atop Naruto's shoulder, talking to him about how her life had been before her capture at the hands of the bandits. After she had washed away all the grime and dirt from her body, Naruto was able to get a clear look at her appearance. Her hair was a reddish black, mostly straight, though there were a few bangs that were curled. Her eyes were a deep shade of forest green. Her face was rounded, giving her a chubby look. Finally she was rather tall. He estimated that she was at least 2 or 3 inches taller than Konohamaru. They would reach the Leaf Village in the afternoon, around 6, and he would ask his Gigi for the adoption papers for Megumi. She would become his sister. Gates of Konoha 6:30 p.m. Izumo and Katetsu were assigned yet again to be on guard duty. "Mon, I'm bored," Katetsu sighed. "It's so boring without Naruto, too quiet." A snort came from his partner. "Yeah, the Gaki always finds a way to make a boring day livelier." He looked at the gates. A large group was approaching. Leading was a boy with a younger kid on his shoulders, followed by a woman dressed with bandages. "Holy," Izumo gasped, "that's Team 8 right?" Katetsu nodded. "Yes. Hokage-sama sent them to clear a bandit camp." He grimaced. "Bit early if you ask me. Heard they didn't even have the exercises to make it easier." 10 minutes later, the large group of civilians were being led by a Junin while Team 8+1 headed towards the Hokage Tower. Kurenai was giving the report of both their missions to the old man, who nodded at some points, frowned at others and chuckled at some more. He frowned a lot during the report of the bandit clearing. To the side were the young teens and the child. Naruto was behind the desk, showing the awestruck Megumi the sights that could be seen from there. He would take her to the Hokage monument later. Shino was talking with his bugs, asking what was that Naruto had unleashed at the bandit settlement. And Hinata was meekly staring at everywhere at the office, but nowhere close to the Hokage. Finally Kurenai's report was finished. "And that's what happened, Hokage-sama." She bowed before stepping back, motioning for her students to stand with her. "Very well," Sarutobi started. "I trust you helped your genin handle their first kill, Kurenai?" At her affirmative he continued, "Good, good, you and your team are being put on leave for the week. Only 1D rank per day." He closed his eyes in thought, before snapping them open. "Also cut your training sessions in half. Mostly concentrate on thing to get past the trauma." Kurenai nodded. "You may leave now. Naruto, you stay. I want to talk with you." The now redhead gulped, recognizing the voice of the old man as the voice of a leader and not the one of a grandfather. Team 8 left through the door, each sending the blonde their version of a concerned glance. Finally it was only him, Megumi, who was looking confused, and Sarutobi Hiruzen. "What do you want to talk about, Gigi?" the sweating blonde asked his grandfather. "How are you faring, Naruto?" the old man asked, ignoring the question. "What you did was not something that would come easily for most men. I am surprised that you look as well as you do. Both your teammates were looking pale," Sarutobi told him, looking at him with harsh, yet kind, eyes. "It was hard, Gigi," the whiskered boy confessed. "I threw up just after IK killed." His breath hitched, but, after spending some time with Sensei and Megumi, I'm alright. The old man considered his words. He looked at the girl that was looking at the purple-eyed boy. Kurenai had said that Naruto had gone on a rampage after seeing her tied up and beaten. Yet he could see that even after only a day the two were close, not like siblings yet, but what she felt was exactly what Konohamaru felt for the teen. Given a few weeks they would most likely be as close as whole-life brother and sister. "Another thing I want to know is if you know what made you go into rampage at the camp." Kurenai told me she felt ki, the old man asked, but his voice damanded in answer. The boy looked sheepish, and the slightest bit ashamed. It was the Kyuubi's Yuki. The old man narrowed his eyes. He had been sure the boy didn't know what the seal on his stomach contained. "I met Kyuubi when I was 5, The aged Hokage didn't notice his slip. It was after I was kicked out of the orphanage. I was so exhausted that when I passed out I went to my mindscape. Megumi had fallen asleep now. Naruto was relived about that. He would tell her when they were alone. He continued speaking before his grandfather kid. After that day I started speaking with the fox. He kept me company and eventually we became friends, more like brothers. But he didn't need to know that. Inside my mind I learned how to fend for myself. Not exactly a lie. His mother had taught him. And when I started the academy he helped me get better control over my chakra. Besides what you gave me and what I read. Sarutobi mused over the words of the teen opposite to him. The boy had known of his burden, yet he hadn't come to him. He supposed it was because he himself hadn't brought it up. Naruto had the habit of keeping things to himself unless completely necessary. Their eyes met, and Hiruzen got the impression that the boy was still hiding something important, but what? You do realize that I could punish you for keeping a secret like that? The teen flinched. I won't however, because it was supposed to be kept a secret. Sarutobi sighed, his age catching up a bit. They stayed in silence for a while, the only sound being the soft snores coming from Megumi. Finally Naruto spoke, Gigi, I was wondering if I could adopt her. His eyes were silently defying the Hokage to say no. The fire shadow rubbed his temples, he had expected this honestly. He looked at his surrogate grandson, he had that look. The look that said that he would not back down, no matter what. I must first tell you some things. The boy nodded, the look not disappearing. Adopting her will most likely mean that you will have to do at least one D-rank mission a day. This time an affirmative grunt accompanied the nod. You will have to expand your apartment. He was interrupted by Naruto. That's not a problem. You bought the whole top floor for me. Hiruzen nodded, he had forgotten that. And lastly, she needs a place to stay whenever you get out of the village for missions. He held a hand, halting the response. I know that you want to take her with you whenever you go on C ranks and higher, but you cannot. He looked at Naruto dead in the eyes. You may be an adult on the eyes of the law, and she would be your legal daughter. Though he doubted the redhead would see it like that. It is forbidden to take a minor to any missions, even D ranks. Naruto scowled but nodded, he had expected that. He still didn't like it, but he had expected it. He would have to leave her with the Ichirakus during his trips outside the village. I understand, don't worry Hokage-sama. The old man looked surprised at the honorific. The boy had probably used it to get extra point with him. He handed the 13-year-old the adoption papers. 30 minutes and a clever use of the cage bunchen later, and Naruto left the tower with his sleeping daughter, leaving behind an old man smashing his head on the desk, muttering, stupid. The next day Naruto's apartment. Naruto awoke groggily the next day. Strangely enough his usually fast waking up cycle was incredibly slow that day. He stayed an odd amount of time in the land between asleep and awake. His head was throbbing for some reasons, and occasionally he would hear a shout of frustration or a sigh of disappointment inside his head. The seal was weakening again. In 2 days' time he would be able to communicate freely with his Ka-chan and Kurama. He suddenly noticed how heavy his chest felt, as if though he had forgotten to deactivate his weight seals for the night, but he knew that was not the case. Slowly he looked down from the roof and smiled when he took in the scene. Megumi, now Uzumaki Megumi, had sometime during the night found her way to his chest, curling around herself and snuggling into him with a happy and serene smile on her face. He gently moved from the bed, careful to not wake her up, and went about his normal routine. Exercise, a shower and preparing breakfast, which from now on would be for 2. He would have to find a way to make the Chisio Bunchen less exhausting, to make it every time he left the village for more than a month. He wouldn't want to leave Megumi for herself, even if he did trust the Ichiraku with everything. After all, they were family in all but blood. 2 hours later the redhead was finishing preparing a normal breakfast. Boiled rice, sunny-side-up eggs and bacon. If only he could eat ramen for breakfast. A noise from the bedroom drew his attention away from the eggs. Megumi had woken up and was rubbing the sleep out of her eyes. Come Megumi-chan, food's ready, he told her, and she sleepily made her way to the table. They ate in silence, the 9-year-old occasionally nodding off, before catching herself and shaking her head in an attempt to get the sleepiness out of her system. Hey Megumi-chan, get ready, we're going to have a busy day, the girl groaned. Why couldn't they just sleep? That would be the perfect day, stay in a soft surface and sleep the day away. Her thoughts were interrupted however, as the teen continued talking. I have to show around. Where you can find me, where you'll study, the best place for eating in town, where the parks are. He looked at her and saw that her eyes had lit up at the mentions of parks. Time for the finisher. You could even make some friends, you know, for when I have to leave, but if you want to stay here, alone. Before he finished talking, the girl was already heading for the corridor, searching for the bathroom to take a shower. He sighed. While it was true that he would show her around, he would have to take her shopping, which meant entering the merchant district. While there were many shops that accepted him, if just for business, they all overpriced him. Only 2 clothing shops did not overcharge him, and one of them was for ninja clothing. The problem with the other was that its products were meant for more aged targets, those that had just reached adulthood and onwards. As much as he didn't like it, he would have to give Ayame-chan the money for her to take Megumi-chan shopping, unnoticed by him. His wallet, Gama-chan, shed a tear, which soon turned into full crying. Ichiraku's 2:30 p.m. The chef and his daughter were preparing the food for Konoha's rush hour. Many people would start to fill the small stand, and those would be the easy ones to deal with. The problem resided within a single teenaged boy, who would soon come for his daily feed of ramen, a meal that would probably fill a medium family. True enough, their main source of income came into the stand, and he wasn't alone. Ohio, Ayame-chan. Tuchi Oji. There was a little girl by his side. Hello Naruto-kun. You haven't come in a while, Ayame greeted him, a slight warning in her tone. Ah, well, you see, I had a mission out of the village, and, the smile on her face was scary. And this was from a kid that had faced dead by pranked Anbu on multiple cases. Tucci meanwhile looked amused at the boy trying to calm his daughter down. It warmed his heart that even after his not-so-good early years the boy could function properly. His eyes moved to the girl that was hiding behind the redhead. She was probably no older than 9, he noted. And who might you be? His question brought Ayame's attention from the redhead to the dark-haired girl that looked nervous. Naruto sighed on relief. He had evaded a blade there. This is Megumi-chan. Found her on the way back to the village. He smiled. She's living with me now. The brown-haired teen raised her eyebrow. Really? The girl nodded shyly. Well then I suppose we convert you to a ramen follower. Megumi looked at Naruto confused. What the hell was a ramen follower? That's right. I brought her so she could taste your awesome ramen datbayo. He exclaimed. The aged chef smiled. Well then, your first 2 plates are on the house. He took his notepad. What will you have? The usual Oji-san, Naruto replied. I want a beef ramen, Megumi ordered. Coming up, Tucci left to the kitchens. Ayame-chan. The 15-year-old looked at Naruto. I was wondering if you would like to come shopping. The brown-haired teen smirked. Why Naruto-kun? Are you asking me on a date? She held back a grin when he saw the boy blush and sputter. Naruto, however, was embarrassed, and the innocent front Ayame was putting definitely didn't help. It's not like that, TT Ibeo. He shouted. Megumi needs to go shopping and will need advice. Megumi looked in shock. He was going to let her buy what she wanted. The innocent expression turned into a sad one. A pout dominating Ayame's face. So Naruto doesn't think I'm pretty, I'm gonna cry. The trembling lip was a nice touch. Ah, please don't cry Ayame-chan. You are pretty, just don't cry. Ah, so easy it was to tease the boy. Tucci's voice cut into the conversation. Ayame, stop teasing Naruto and go with him. He will probably need help in the stores. Ayame was sporting a real pout now. Really, why couldn't she have fun with the boy? It was funny to see him riled up. The rest of the meal was spent on lighter note, and after 3 bowls for Megumi, her conversion to the ramen was successful. And the usual dozen for Naruto, him, Ayame and Megumi left for the shopping area. Naruto's apartment nighttime. A smiling Megumi and a crying Naruto entered the apartment. The predictions of Gama-chan had been proven right. She was almost as skinny as when she was new. They had hit the stores at 4, and kept jumping from shop to shop all throughout the evening. A full wardrobe, a bed for when the expansion was complete, groceries, toys and a fox plushie had been bought, resulting on him being broke at the moment. Luckily he had resupplied his equipment the last week. He made his way to bed after putting everything away, changing to his PJs, Megumi doing the same. The last thing he saw before falling asleep was the small body taking her place at his chest. Konoha's training ground 1 week later. It was a beautiful day in Konohagakure no Sato. The sun was bright, the animals lively, and the children were playing outside, laughing and having fun. Yata, I finally managed it. Bayo. The hero of this story was on his team's training ground. During the past week Naruto had been trying master the first step of the Rasengan to an acceptable level. That level being popping the balloon in less than 10 seconds. Good job Soki, you can start on the second tomorrow. The seal had also gotten back to normal, allowing him to communicate with Kushina and Kurama. He still shivered whenever he remembered the additional training his mother had put him through. She had driven him to the ground in her anger at him losing control. Wow, Oni-chan, that's awesome. Megumi had started to see him as a brother, which made him ecstatic the first time she called him that. Yeah Bozu, nay, can we do it too? Konohamaru started to follow him every once in a while, hoping for a bit of learning that would be given. It would be so cool if we could. With Kono had come a friend of his, Moegi, a girl with V-shaped orange pigtails, a red top and tan pants. The three of they would later be known as the Konoha Corps, but that is a story for another time. Naruto smiled, happy that they were as eager to learn as he was when he was younger. I can't teach it to you yet, he told them, I have to master it myself first. He chuckled at their downtrodden looks, although I think I can teach you something. Their face did a complete 180 from disappointed to eager. Was he like that whenever his Ka-chan taught him something new? Yes you were, you would jump in place for 10 minutes before I taught you the theory part of a jutsu, forget he asked then. Did you really have to ruin the moment? He scowled. I love you too Soki, forget it. Bozu, are you okay? Right, he had some brats to teach. No, don't worry Moegi-chan. He cleared his throat, I'm going to teach you the Henge no Jutsu. He looked at the time. He had 1 hour before the mission time. I'm just going to tell you the theory behind it, I'll have to leave soon. The Henge, or transformation, is one of the easiest yet most useful techniques there is. The reason it's a basic. The one you will learn in the academy is a genjutsu. It makes your chakra fool anyone looking at you to think you are another person, or you have a different build. The main problem with it is that if you transform into something that is bigger or smaller than you, the illusion will be easier to notice, or if you touch something it will dispel. Konohamaru raised his arm. Doesn't that make it useless? I mean, if it can break so easily then it can't be as useful as you say, he asked, and the redhead nodded in agreement. Indeed, but it is good for academy to teach because it doesn't require big chakra reserves. He smirked, but it is useless in the field, which is why I'm teaching you a variation. A better one, the Shin no Henka no Jutsu, the true change technique. It works much like my Kage Bunshin, it creates a shell of chakra, but instead of making a different, thinking entity, it molds around you in the form you want. This has disadvantages too. You can't become something smaller, only bigger. Your equilibrium is severely damaged if you change your shape too much. I'll be honest, the three of you can cast it, but only Kono would be able to hold it for more than 5 minutes, and it will leave you all exhausted after doing it. I don't want you to do it without me watching, too dangerous for your health, and after you managed it for the first time I'll have you do exercises for you to increase your reserves. He looked at his watch, 10 minutes before he had to report. Now come on, we're heading back to the village. The trip back was spent explaining the many uses of the technique he would teach them. Hokage's office. Sarutobi Hiruzen was a patient man, a direct result of his old age. He had lived through wars, and while he was still a warrior at heart, he would always prefer the peaceful approach to the problems that threatened the village. He often saw young people leave the safety of the walls of Konoha in a quest for the fame that being a ninja could bring. Some of them made it past their 30s. Most of them did not get past 25 without a scar to mark the turning point of their lives. He would often wonder if it was right, sending children and teenagers to kill bandits. It would scar them in the deepest part of their hearts, but such was the way of the shinobi. 2 days ago he had sent a team of young prospects to a country in need of help. Team 7 was that team. They had encountered more than what they had expected and were now requesting backup. The scene Team 8 saw when they entered the office was that of grim old man, eyes made of steel. It was a scene that made the usually happy Naruto stand attentive at what his leader would tell them to do. After a few seconds, in which the Hokage looked at each of them in the eye, he spoke, Team 8, yesterday a messenger summon came to me with a message from the captain of Team 7. He paused, daring anyone to interrupt. In the message was a request for backup. Kurenai's ruby-colored eyes widened. They came across missing nins on the way to Nami no Kuni. the country they were supposed to take their client to, Nami no Kuni, if what his Ka-chan was telling him was right. Naruto could go to the destroyed land of Uzu after the mission. This made the ranking of the mission jump from a C rank to a possible A rank. He held a hand up, halting the response from the sensei in the room. I would have sent a Chunin team, but the only ones available are loner ones that recently got promoted and are preparing for their own assignments. He sighed. What he would do was hard for him. Team 8, you are to go to the rendezvous point on Nami and help Squad 7 in their mission. Dismissed. He slid a scroll across the desk before turning his seat around, showing that no arguments would be heard. Kurenai closed her eyes. Couldn't they have a normal mission for once? Meet me at the gates in half an hour. I'm leaving whether or not you're there. With that said, she left the room, her students following some ways behind. Southern Gates 20 minutes later. Naruto arrived last of the group, a note in his hand that was addressed to Hokage Gigi. Kurenai had arrived 10 minutes after being dismissed, having taken a pack that was pre-made for this kind of things. Hinata had arrived 5 minutes after. One of the storage scrolls Naruto had given her was filled with healing materials and first aid kits. Shino arrived shortly after her, with a pack full of insect tanks, and scrolls with provisions and clothes. Naruto, like always, had sealed everything he would take on various scrolls, sealed in turn on his master scroll. He had taken Megumi to the Ichirakus. She would stay with them during his time outside the village. Hopefully he would find the Uzumaki Nin Fuinjutsu notes to make the Chiseo Bunshin a more viable option. Before leaving, I will tell you that this is going to be a very big exemption to the rank range rules and it will most likely not be repeated, Kurenai told her team, who nodded in agreement. Good, now come on. Naruto looked down to his hand. Katetsu the man looked up from his game of solitaire. Could you send this to the Hokage as soon as you can no longer see us? He handed the bemused man the note he had written. Sure Naruto, but why not give it to him in person? He was confused. Really, messages to the Hokage were usually sent during mission, not before them. Because I don't think he will like what I will do. Now that was new. Naruto disobeying the fire shadow? Before he could speak his thought, however, Naruto left to catch up with the rest of his team, leaving the eternal Chunin to contemplate the note. What could Naruto say that would displease the Hokage so much that he had to write a card explaining what he would do? I wasn't Naruto's style. He normally did as he pleased as long as it was within the law, going as far as to find loopholes in the Konoha charter. There was something going on, and the only way to find out was to pass the card to the village leader. Hokage's office 10 minutes later. Slam, Hiruzen slammed both fists on his desk, making it snap in two. 5 minutes ago, one of the Chunin assigned to guard duty had barged into his office carrying a note from his surrogate grandson. Said note had something he had not expected to hear, that Naruto held way more secrets than what he had thought. Gigi, I'm writing this because I don't think I can say it to your face. I know you don't like me stepping too much out of the line, but what I'll do is something that must be done. I can't let you stop me. Gigi, I have many secrets, secrets that I don't want to reveal, secrets that I can't reveal to you yet. This is one of them. I wanted to tell you this in person, and on a later date, but it cannot wait anymore. I know who my mother is. I know where my family is from. I'm going to visit my country after this mission is done. It's something I must do, to finally give closure to the defeat of Uzu. I know why you hid it from me. To prevent me from being prosecuted by the people who would want the Uzumaki bloodline. I don't blame you. I would have done it slightly different though. I still don't know who my father is, so that is still a secret kept from me. Again, I know why you're hiding it. I will probably come back with the remaining Uzumaki archives, the ones that survived the Kumo Iwa invasion. So please keep the civilians off my back when I get back. If you could buy me the rest of the complex I live in, it would be appreciated. Just take it out of half the share I get from all the missions I do from now on. I will explain how I know of my heritage get back, for if you want to know. Just please, please, don't try to pry too much into me. There are some things that I want to take with me to the grave. I hope you aren't too mad at me for keeping secrets, but you know what would happen if some thongs got out in the open. Don't worry, Uzumaki Naruto. Needless to say, Hiruzen was frustrated. Naruto had somehow managed to hide knowledge like that from him, something deemed impossible by many. Not only that, but who know what else he knew? It could be something as small as the names of all his genin, to something as serious as the patrol routes and schedules. He would interrogate that boy when he came back, and damn if he wasn't going to be harsh. Wave country. Kakashi threw himself at his students and client, sending them all to the ground. Thunk, he stood up and looked behind, to the giant cleaver that had embedded itself on the trunk of a tree. Well, what do we have here? A rough voice brought the attention of everyone to the handle of the massive sword. Sharingan no Kakashi. No wonder the Onikyodai failed their attempt. A high-end A-rank ninja wouldn't be taken down by two lower B-rank ones. The man standing there scoffed. I hope you can give me a good fight, otherwise I'll just kill the old man hiding behind your brats. Momochi Zabuza. Hitaki narrowed his eye. He would need some lucky shots against that cleaver of him. I should have expected it. You became a mercenary after your failed coup. The man, Momochi Zabuza, was a few years younger than Kakashi, with black hair and eyes, and the lower part of his face covered by bandages and only wearing a pair of gray pants apart from some camouflaged leg and arm warmers. He jumped down, dislodging the cleaver on his way down. I suppose I'm well known because of that, but you forget the reason Kiri is now on civil war. Kakashi's eye narrowed even more. News of a blood rebellion had been traveling across the elemental nations, and the man he was staring at was the cause. The eyebrowless man chuckled. I assume that you won't hand the drunken man over. Kakashi moving into a stance was his answer. I see, well then. His hands moved into a sign, Kirigakure no Jutsu. Instantly, the mist around them became thick and heavy, reducing the sight of Team 7 to a meager range. Sasuke, Sakura and Kiba moved closer to Tazuna, each with a kunai at the ready. The killing intent washed over them, paralyzing them in place. Sasuke was pretty sure that Tazuna was close to passing out, and that Sakura was about to lose control of her bowels. He himself was only holding up because of that day. There are 8 places where even a glancing blow can be fatal. Zabuza's voice came from everywhere yet nowhere. The larynx, the spine, the lungs, the liver, the jugular vein, the subclavian artery, the kidneys, and the heart. The key multiplied. Where should I strike first? The copycat cursed when he looked at his students. They were stiff with fear. Don't worry guys. The faces of the youngsters snapped to him. As long as I am here nothing can happen to you. He moved his headband fully to his forehead, uncovering a red eye with 3 tomo markings, which made Sasuke gasp. Touching words, but can you keep them? A voice whispered in his ear, before he felt cold metal at his throat. I wouldn't. Why if I were you, Zabuza? A blade touched the neck of the missing nin. You're not the only one that can use water release, you know. The Kakashi Zabuza was holding turned into water. So you copied my Mizu Bunshin after seeing once? Once again a blade was pressed to Hitaki's throat, and he stabbed man in front of him, turning him to water. But I expected that. A fight against the famed Sharingan is impossible to win if you don't think ahead. Kakashi kicked backwards, making Zabuza step back and giving him room to maneuver. He spun the knife around, changing the grip, and moved to engage the ex-Kiri Anbu in close range. He ducked under a swipe from the massive sword, only to roll away from a slash that made the cleaver dig onto the ground. He moved fast and slipped under the guard of the bulkier man, making several attempts at slashing that were either dodged or blocked by the handle of the Zanbatsu. Zabuza smirked under his bandages after an overextended slash. He spun around, bringing the dull side of his Kabikirabocho against Kakashi, sending the Konoha nin to the pond at the side of the clearing, where he sank under the surface. He had gotten him into his trap. The white-haired man shot up from the water, sending chakra to the water so he could use it as a handhold. Any second spent on the water was a second spent on enemy territory. Why is the water so heavy? It's almost as if it were. His eyes widened, charged with chakra. And I win, Kakashi. Too bad you didn't give much fight. It would have been a thrill if you did. Zabuza ran to where the copy nin was halfway in the water. Making hand signs he called for one of his few captured jutsus, Sweden. Suiro no Jutsu. And so, Hitaki Kakashi had been trapped. Hitaki Kakashi was in trouble, and he knew it. He had requested a C-rank mission in order to give his students a wake-up call. They were good kids, but arrogant, the brooding boy that went along on his family's fame, the feral boy that had too much confidence on his strength, and the girl that worried about training only the necessary and not enough to improve in the areas she was talented in. Their growth rate had been slower than that of most genin because of that, yet they were still on the higher end of the rookies, at least the male were. During the trip that would take them to the country their client had lived in, they had encountered missing ninjas from Kirigakure no Sato, so he requested backup before continuing on. After the sob story the drunken architect had given him, he just couldn't abandon him. Now, here he was, trapped inside a Suiro no Jutsu, watching as his students fought the Kirigakure no Kijin alone. Uchiha Sasuke was scared witless for the second time of his short life. The first time had been when his brother had gone mad and killed the whole Uchiha clan before proceeding to make him watch the massacre inside a genjutsu. The reason he had accepted to continue the mission had been because he wanted to test his strength with a chunin that was already aware of his abilities so he could officially consider himself a C to B rank shinobi, and while he thought that fighting a jonin was worth it, he was beginning to regret that decision. The killing intent the monster in front of him released had paralyzed him on sheer terror. His knees were buckling, his hands sweating and his head clouded. And now that his sensei was trapped in that weird water ball he had little to no chance of getting out of there alive if the backup didn't arrive. Inazuka Kiba felt, for the fourth time his life, as if the Shinigami was hot on his heels. The first time was when he had insulted that crazy woman his sister hung around with, the second when he got lost on the wood and entered the territory of a tiger. The last time he had felt like that was when he taunted the Uzumaki with insults thrown at the boy's mother. He had been on the hospital for a week after that. Right now though, he was wishing to go back to those simpler times, when the only thing he had to worry about was how Akamaru was growing and how badly had he done at the academy. The main problem was that no one on their team really, know how to repel killing intent, and they could only ignore so much before it got unbearable. He, like the rest of his team, could only hope the backup their sensei had requested got here soon. Haruno Sakura had been raised by a civilian merchant that had established in Konoha. Her mother was part of the Merchants Guild and her father worked in one of the many clothing shops that were strewn about in the village. That being said, she had joined the ninja ranks because of the glamour she thought it would bring. Never had she expected that she could die because of a severe case of misinformation at the hands of an old man. She had thought that whatever her sensei gave to her would be enough to get her to chunin, and never even considered to seek someone to expand on her great grasp at chakra control or chakra-induced strength. But she would start seeking advice and training from other sources if they got out of this situation alive. Momochi Zabuza had lived a rather bloody life. His childhood on the bloody mist had been one of the many things that had broken him and turned him into the man he was now. A monster that always loved to spill the blood of those who opposed him on his goals. At the age of 9 he had been forced to kill his best friend on a battle staged by his academy, an act that left him so scarred that he proceeded to kill everyone so that none that came after him would have to do it again. When he was a jonin he had found a girl on the streets, a girl that would later become his first apprentice and part of his legacy, even if he thought she was too gentle. 3 weeks later another kid, this time a boy, would become attached to him too, making him his second apprentice and the second part of his testament. When he joined the Kirigakure no Shichinin Sho, he protected the village he had been born in because of a sense of obligation, rather than want. He had become delusioned with the path his hometown was taking. By the time the Kagaya attacked Kiri, he was so hopeless in it that he ran away with his apprentice and left to wait till such time that it became the great village it once was. He had always liked the thrill of the battle, the adrenaline pumping and the senses overloading. He had been ecstatic when he saw that Hitaki Kakashi would be his rival for the battle. A ninja of his reputation would be the experience of a lifetime. He knew that Hitaki would find a way to break out of his water prison, but until then, why not have some fun? Team 8 a mile into the sea from Waves Beach. Sensei, Naruto's whisper broke through the silence of their boat ride. What's the plan when we get there? Do we set our own camp or search for the other team? Kurenai thought on the question. It was a valid one, she supposed. Set a camp before nightfall or find the team that had requested backup as soon as they arrived. Both had its merits. On one hand they could arrive fast but not at a 100%, on the other they could rest for the night and help during the next day when they were at the top of their current capabilities. She sighed. We'll look for Kakashi's team as soon as we land. If they are on battle I'm sure they'll appreciate the help. Her team nodded. Anyo, sensei, Hinata whispered, her Byakugan active. There is a lot of chakra being released inland. She looked at Kurenai. Most of it is channeled to the mist around a pond. They were landing now. The boatman nodded at them before setting off into the mist around the island. We're moving fast, if I'm right. They need help now more than ever. She looked at her team's juggernaut. Prepare your weapons, Naruto. We can't afford to hold back. The boy nodded, and the team leapt across the forest, intent on aiding their comrades. Back with Team 7, Sasuke was desperate now. They would have to fight until whoever was coming arrived, if they ever did. A glance at his wild teammate sent the thought across. We need to fight, dog boy. The Uchiha told him. Hopefully we can release Sensei, and he'll finish Zabuza off. Kiba nodded, still scared speechless, but aware enough to know what would happen if they didn't fight. Sasuke ran at the water clones that had sprung from poodles on the grass, intent on taking some of them out. Kiba had Akamaru transform into him, so the two of them could fight together, as true Inuzukas would. A clone of the dozen engaged on a taijutsu battle with Sasuke. The boy dodged, ducked and rolled out of the massive sword's way. He tried to get punches in whenever an opening presented itself, but whenever he tried it the attack was quickly countered and a bruise would form. He kicked after standing up from a duck under a swing that left the clone open at the chest. The clone took a step back, dazed from the kick, which allowed the Uchiha to stab it in the lung. Kiba swiped at the clone he was currently fighting, retracting his arm quickly and jumping aside a vertical slash. Akamaru spun from behind the clone and did a roundhouse. The clone blocked the strike with its forearm, grabbing the offending limb and swinging in an arch, making boy and beast clone crash into one another. Righting themselves they shouted, "Gatsuga," and barreled into the clone from the back and the front, managing to dispel it from the hit. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A voice familiar to those from Konoha brought a smile of relief to their faces. 5 of the remaining clones were stabbed at a part of their body, making them nothing but poodles on the ground. One was disrupted by a palm strike to the heart, rendering it useless. 2 were shrouded by insects that sucked the chakra out of them, making them just water. The last 2 fell to a kunai to the throat. 4 people dropped to the ground, all of them on guard and staring at the demon of the mist. "Hinata, Shino, stay with the client." Kurenai spoke with the voice of the leader. "Naruto, is it only us around?" Naruto crouched and put his palm to the floor. He closed his eyes and his hand glowed blue. "Yes, I think some animals are running away. But yes." The purple-eyed redhead answered, getting into stance again. Zabuza meanwhile was having a mental struggle. Damn, more brats and a woman. At least they looked competent. His eyes narrowed when the red-eyed woman started making hand signs he didn't recognize. "Genjutsu. Zenshin Fuzui no Jutsu," Kurenai spoke, and the bandaged man felt his arms and legs lose mobility. The demon of the mist tried in vain to move, not succeeding on any of his attempts. He had one option, one that would leave him with an uphill battle. Interrupt his chakra flow and release Hitaki. "I admit you were smart at requesting reinforcements, Kakashi." He slowly moved his chakra inward. A flare of his chakra would make his students come. Still, better for me. More food to feed the demon. With a grunt all of his pent-up chakra was released, making the younger Konoha nin gasp as it hit them. Kubakiribucho was on the move as soon as Zabuza's mobility was back, attempting to behead the still dizzy white-haired man, but the attack was blocked by a reinforced kunai. "Nice save, Kurenai," the copy nin panted out. "You could have gotten here a bit earlier though, I was about to lose consciousness." His eyes moved from the genjutsu mistress towards the swordsman. "How about we finish this?" he asked with an air of nonchalance. He dodged under a swipe and aimed a punch at the stomach of his opponent. The punch was grabbed, as was the counterattack with the flat side of the sword. Both Jonin jumped back and started moving in zigzags patterns, clashing blades whenever they met at the center of their trajectory. They ran back, making the same hand seals at the same time. "How is copying me?" Zabuza asked himself. "It's like he can see what I'll do." "That's your thinking, right?" His thoughts were interrupted by Kakashi. "It must be that eye of his. I'm starting to get pissed off. Stop finishing my sentences." "Sweden. Suryuden no Jutsu," they chanted at the same time, clapping their hands together. 2 dragons rose out of the water, circling around each other, snapping bites at the other, before rearing back, roaring and crashed head-on into the other, raining water over the 6 genin and single jonin watching. Zabuza glared into Kakashi's eyes. "I am starting to hate that bloody monkey?" Once again they started making hand seals, but unnoticed by everyone was the fact that Kurenai was doing them too. "Kake me no jutsu," she whispered, planting the illusion on Zabuza. Said monster looked up from the feet of his opponent to his face, to see himself in the place where Hitaki should be. What? How? Am I looking at a mirror? The monetary pause was what Kakashi needed to finish his chain before Zabuza did. Sweden. Daibakufu no Jutsu. He shouted. A large wall of water formed in front of the copycat, making Zabuza still with shock. The wall then rushed forward, taking the Kijin with it and slamming the man into a tree. Zabuza, your future has been decided. The downed man looked at Kakashi. The Shinigami awaits your arrival. Just as Kakashi was about to thrust his kunai into Zabuza's chest, two senbon pierced the man's neck, making his eyes widen before he fell forward. Thank you Konoha Shinobi. A voice brought the attention of the group towards a tree. Two figures were standing on a branch. My partner and I have been hunting him for a while now. The one that spoke was certainly more feminine, but both had Ryoshi nin masks from Kiri on, hiding their faces. The more masculine of the two jumped down from his perch, and spoke in a hard tone, we'll be taking him now. Mizukage-sama has been asking for his corpse for a while now. He picked the body up, then you again for letting us get the drop on him, and both hunters disappeared. It would be Naruto that broke the silence that ensued. That was rather anticlimactic, wasn't it? Everyone nodded in agreement. The guards were dropped eventually. Kakashi covered his Sharingan, Naruto let his talons disappear. Akamaru transformed back and Hinata deactivated her Byakugan. Kakashi spoke in between panting breaths, again Kurenai, thank you for the help. I think the battle would have been drawn out if you hadn't arrived. Kurenai rolled her eyes. Kakashi's lone eye was straying around her body. Save it Kakashi, she told him. The bridge builder scratched his neck and spoke to the ninjas, I'll be taking you to my home now. The kids nodded, it's about a mile away, so we shouldn't take long. Kakashi nodded, though his eye was becoming half-lidded, lead the way then. He managed to say before he went to blissful unconsciousness. He was cashed by Naruto, who deactivated his weights. The boy grunted under the weight and noticed the worried look sent his way. Don't worry, he's got chakra exhaustion. Nothing that doesn't go away with a good meal and a lot of sleep. He told Team 7, before muttering to himself, I should know, bloody Uzumaki training. Kurenai cleared her throat, if we could get going Tazuna-san. The man nodded and set off, everyone following after him. The entourage was standing in front of a rather humble house at the edge of the ocean. It had 2 stories and was rather traditional. Tazuna knocked on the door. It was answered by a woman in her late 20s, with straight black hair, fair skin and dark eyes. Her eyes widened at seeing Tazuna. With a cry of, Atu-san, she launched herself to the old man, making him take a step back to keep from falling over. She noticed the large group behind her father and stood back. Who are they, father? She asked the builder. Tazuna grinned, they are the super ninjas that got me here. He turned to the sweat-dropping group, everyone, this is my daughter, Tsunami. Tsunami seemed surprised before she bowed to them. Thank you for bringing my father back, she told them. The group looked confused at the woman, and everyone had different reactions. 2 of them being Naruto scratching the back of his head and Hinata blushing, but that was usual for them. Kurenai, as the only responsible adult awake, took charge of the situation. It was nothing, Tsunami-san. She told the bowing woman, who straightened herself, would you be so kind as to direct my student? She motioned to Naruto, who adjusted Kakashi, to a room where he could put my partner. She waved them all inside, of course. Please come in. She guided them to the stairs. Inari, come to greet our guests. A boy, no older than 8, came down the stairs, looked at them with disdain, and ran to hug his grandfather, Oji-san. It's good to have you back, he spoke from within the embrace. The drunken builder smiled at the kid. It's good to see you too, Inari. He pointed at the shinobi gathered at the small living room. The disdain was once again the main emotion seen on the boy's face, completely a 180 from the affection shown to his grandpa. They're going to die within the week. Following the statement, he ran up the stairs, ignoring the shouts from his mother. Tsunami sighed at her son, sorry about him. He has been like that for a while now, she apologized. Unnoticed by his sensei, Naruto made a mocking face pointed at the roof, meant for the kid closed inside his room, making the genin present snicker. Don't worry Tsunami-san, Kurenai told the woman. Now, if you could tell Naruto where to put the man he's carrying, she let the sentence hang. Tsunami shook her head, yes, I only have 2 rooms, so pick one of the doors on the left side of the corridor upstairs. Naruto nodded, and adjusting Hitaki once again, started climbing the stairs. He ignored the sniffling coming from one of the rooms, unsealed one of the bedrolls inside his arm and set the unconscious man down. When do you think he'll be up, Ka-chan? He asked as he inspected the room. Kushina hummed and thought. Knowing Kakashi, he's going to awaken tomorrow, and be at his top in a week. Naruto felt his eyes widen in surprise. You know him? He said. Kushina cursed quietly. She hadn't planned to let that slip. Now how to answer without giving away Minato's identity as his father. He was constantly sent on a lot missions with your father during the last war. That was as much as she could give without telling him, and he befriended him during his youth. Do you think he could tell me stories about Toussaint? He asked. He really wanted to know his father better, even if his Okawa-san couldn't tell him who he was. Kushina considered his question. It couldn't hurt, hearing someone's opinion, one that wasn't hers, sure, but remember, you can't know his name until you're at least. She was cut off by an annoyed Naruto, Tokubetsu Jonin, so I can defend myself in case it gets out and his enemies come to get me. She had told him this every time he asked when he was younger. He probably knew the ensuing rant that would follow if he hadn't interrupted by heart. When Kushina was about to retort, Naruto was called downstairs by his sensei, effectively cutting off the discussion. He ran down the stairs, jumping over the last 3 steps. He vaulted over the back of the couch and sat himself between his teammates. This is a nice place, TT Ibeo, he told Hinata, who blushed at closeness. Kurenai face palmed at his student. Really, why couldn't he keep the seriousness outside of battle? She looked at the genin of Team 7, who were seated on the somewhat smaller sofa. Kids, I'm going to be in charge until your sensei wakes up. She told them. What was the lost thing he showed you? Sasuke looked at his teammates before answering. He told us that we mastered the tree walking last week. We've been at it so it's more natural. Sakura added something of her own. He wanted to teach me a genjutsu this week. It would be the 3rd. Kurenai nodded. She had suspected that. The girl had small reserves and good control. Still, she would have to get out of the fangirl phase. She had been staring at the Uchiha for a while now. Kiba spoke when the woman looked at him. He has been helping me improve my speed, for my taijutsu. Kurenai nodded again. It was more than what she had expected. Honestly, the man was so lazy and laid back that she was sure he would have let them train on their own after improving what he believed was more important than anything. Has he tested your natures yet? She wasn't expecting a positive answer. She herself hadn't tested her students, though she was going to do it if the mission hadn't interfered. The only reason Naruto knew his was because he had had trouble with the normal Bunshin. Sakura and Kiba assumed curious expression and shook their heads, while Sasuke only grunted in response. Naruto, she called to her hyper student, who looked up from his discussion with Shino. Do you have some special paper inside your seals? The boy looked confused, before his face lit up with understanding and he nodded. How many? Team 7, Hinata, Shino and the civilians present looked on in confusion as Naruto's face screwed up and thought WJILE. He crossed his arms and looked at the tattoos on them. Finally he sighed. I think I have 3, maybe 4, he told her, shaking his head. I was going to give them to you sensei, but it slipped my mind, he admitted sheepishly. The red-eyed woman sighed at her student, once again questioning his mental capacity. She shook those thoughts off. Someone that could prank the Anbu was by no means an idiot, especially if he did it repeatedly. I'll have to ask the hentai if he has some, then, she muttered. She turned so she could look at everyone present. I believe we should go unpack, Tsunami-san, Tazuna-san. Call any of us if you need help. The civilians nodded and the young genins followed upstairs, the boys entering the bigger of the 2 rooms and the girls the smaller one. Dining room 8:50 p.m. There wasn't anything noteworthy for diner. It was tasty, as most homemade food was, but because the hold Gato had over the country, everything was half spoiled. It was a silent affair, the only noise coming from cutlery scrapping the plates, with the occasional rustling from someone shifting his position. The portions were small, only enough to fill them, but not enough to leave them with a rounded belly. Sakura felt her vision wander sometime after she finished her meal. Her eyes settled over a piece of furniture with photos on top of it. A particular one caught her interest, one that seemed to be missing something, as if a part of it had been. Excuse me Tsunami-san, but why is that picture ripped? She pointed at it. The atmosphere of comfortable silence changed into an awkward, and Sakura found herself regretting asking the question. Inari slid his chair back and stood up, quickly storming up the stairs. Tazuna lowered his head and gripped the edge of the table while Tsunami covered her mouth and tried not to let tears fall. Tazuna spoke lowly but clearly, and nobody missed a word. The part that was taken off had the hero of the country in it. Sensing, rather than seeing the questioning looks on the faces of the shinobi present, he looked up, as if remembering something. He was an important person all over the island. Inari met him when he was 5. Some bullies had thrown a puppy Inari owned into the sea, to see him cry. He threw himself at the water without thinking about the fact that he didn't know how to swim. The puppy did know how to swim, it just didn't remember because of the shock. It swam to the beach, dried itself and walked away. It was young and hadn't formed a strong bond with Inari. Inari watched in despair. He struggled as more and more water entered his mouth. Eventually his forces left him and he almost drowned. At this point the women gasped and the boys grimaced in sympathy. The old man ignored the reactions and continued the story. He was rescued by Kaiza, a fisherman that happened to be passing by. The man saw bubbles coming to the surface and threw himself to the water. Kaiza set up a fire and laid the, at the time, unconscious Inari near it, so the boy could dry. He also used it to cook some fishes he had managed to catch. When Inari came to, he saw the man giving him a smile and offering him an impaled fish. They talked for the most part of the afternoon, until Inari came home, dragging Kaiza behind him. We invited him to come inside, have dinner with us, before we realized that he had settled himself as a permanent resident and married Tsunami. Said woman was now silently sobbing, yet Tazuna paid her no mind and stared at nothing. He taught Inari his philosophy, to protect everything precious to him, no matter the cost. He also taught the boy to hunt and to fish, so he could provide to his family when Kaiza retired. Kaiza was started to be called the hero of Wave when he saved the village nearby from a flood. The wood dam that kept the water from the town had become undone during a hurricane. Nobody wanted to risk their lives, so they called Kaiza, who was one of the strongest people at the time. Kaiza rushed to the place of the dam and threw himself to the overflowing river. He fought the current, grabbed the cable that secured the door and secured it again, saving the villagers from drowning. From that day forward he could be seen helping people out and teaching children at plazas. The citizens adored him, welcomed him wherever he went. It all went to hell when Gato came. He promised us prosperity, progress and most of all, a place on the map. Yet the only thing he did was buy property. He put taxes over everything he owned. Stores, houses, hotels, tea shops, even the ports were overtaken and bankrupted. Few people had hoped that Gato would ever leave. They had given him way too much of a handhold for him to even consider abandoning his operations here. Kaiza was the leader of that small faction, the spokesperson of the people, and because of that he was on Gato's blacklist immediately. He put up more and more restrictions, hoping for a way to bring Kaiza down. He eventually managed. Kaiza had trespassed into a warehouse owned by Gato, to get some supplies to prepare the next meal. He was caught as soon as he entered. The very next day, he had Kaiza tied up to a pole on the main plaza. Gato went on and on of how Kaiza was a criminal that deserved to be killed. Inari was on first line. He was crying as he saw his father get tortured. Yet Kaiza was smiling throughout it all, happy that he was passing away trying to help those close to him. The midget had his thugs cut Kaiza's arms off. Since he was no longer supported by the pole, his head fell to a position where it would be easy to cut his head off. Gato watched as most of the population cried for their friend, their hero. 2 minutes after his arms were cut off, Gato had his thugs decapitate Kaiza. The goddamn midget left the corpse there for a week. Everyone had their spirits shattered by that. Not a single inhabitant wasn't broken by the time Kaiza was taken off the plaza. I started the bridge in hopes of getting the spirits of the people back. That's why I can't die until it is finished, to honor the memory of my son. The women were all crying openly, their eyes were turning red already. Kiba was holding his head and shaking it, muttering about how bad could the world get. Shino and Sasuke were as downcast as they could get. Their eyes were fixed on the table, and Sasuke could be seen scowling. Naruto was gritting his teeth and griping the table with all his strength. His face was set into an almost pure look of loathing. He raised his head, shadows obscuring everything but his eyes. He looked at the bridge builder directly in the eyes and made a statement that surprised everyone. Don't worry about Gato from now on. By the time we leave, the fucker will be dead. His eyes were glowing with barely restrained anger. Everyone shivered at the look, but Naruto paid them no mind. He stood up and went towards the door. He paused after opening the door. Don't wait for me to come back, I'm going to gather information, he told everyone over his shoulder, before slamming the door close. Everyone looked bewildered at the door. No one, not even his team, had seen that part of Naruto. What just happened? Tazuna's voice broke the silence. I sincerely don't know, Kurenai answered, her own questions roaming her head. He has never acted like that. Maybe Kakashi or Yugo have some answers, but she isn't here and he won't wake up yet. The rest of the night was spent in silence. Hideout 1 hour later. Naruto had followed several similar smells, and they led to one of two buildings. One at the other end of the island and another hidden in the woods. He was hiding in the foliage that surrounded a small building. He had seen Gato enter, followed by two samurai wannabes. Half an hour after he had entered, he saw the midget exit and cradling his hand, the two thugs massaging their throats. He narrowed his eyes. Whatever was in there was dangerous, and hopefully able to change its mind and choose a different allegiance. He carefully made his way inside, using a vent on the roof to infiltrate without making any noise. He used his chakra to stick to the side of a drop on the ventilation system and moved to where he could hear voices. He stopped above the vent that on the roof of what looked like a bedroom. You didn't have to do that, Haku, a gruff voice sounded from below. He strained his ear to hear better. I know, Zabuza-sama, but I couldn't let that scum sully you, Haku, he assumed, answered. Zabuza was alive, and he had to report this. I still don't see why we can't just steal his money and go back to Mizu no Kuni. A third voice, this time masculine, but not really as mature as Zabuza's. We may be missing Nin Hagain, but we still have some honor. He was alarmed now, Zabuza and two unknowns to fight in the future, damn. In any case, Zabuza-sama, Haku continued, you should be able for combat in 2 weeks, but knowing you, you'll be moving by Thursday next week. He didn't hear anything after that. He was already turning around. 5 minutes later, he was making his way back to Tazuna's house. He paused momentarily and made a decision. He bit his thumb, made some hand seals and announced, Ninpo, Chisio Bunshin no Jutsu. The wound on his finger started to squirt out of it, pulling a meter in front of him. His chakra started going into the blood, molding it into a human shape. Features started appearing. First skin, then the face, followed by hair and clothes. Naruto barely had time to analyze his creation before falling unconscious. Kurama snorted from within his mind. Gaki should know better than casting that technique without someone watching, he told Kushina. The redhead sighed, at least the clone is still awake, it will keep watch. Kurama only snorted and laid down, growing so the woman could lay down herself. Kakashi had woken up half an hour earlier, still groggy from his exhaustion. Something had bothered him ever since he had awoken, but for the life of him, he couldn't figure it out. He glanced around the room. The kids were still sleeping, but where's Naruto? The boy had been a cause of confusion for him. He was divided on how he should treat the red-headed boy. He knew who the boy was, how could he not? He spent as much time in his sensei's home after the war as he did in the Anbu headquarters. He had been there when Kushina-sama had announced she was pregnant. But every time he looked at him, he was reminded of what he had lost that night. The night of the Kyuubi attack, he had lost whatever remained of his family. Without Minato-sensei and Kushina-sama, he drowned himself in his work, taking more and more missions, until he was ordered by the Hokage to watch over little Naruto. He hadn't seen the kid after his 8th birthday. His life in Anbu still haunted him. The corpses, the kills, every time he had gone after a bounty. It clicked right then. Zabuza wasn't taken by hunter nins, they hadn't destroyed the body. Sasuke. He called to the boy, Sasuke, wake up now. The teen groggily complied, sitting up with a scowl on his face. In any other situation he might have found it funny. Sasuke, wake everyone and tell them to gather here, now. On any other occasion the Uchiha might have discussed, but since his teacher was using a tone that he had rarely seen, he would prefer not to be punished. Forest 9:30. Naruto sat up from where he had fallen the night before. The blood clone had gone hunting sometime during the night and was skinning through whatever it was it had caught. He stood slowly, doing his best to ignore his mother ranting about how reckless it was to do the Chiseo Bunshin alone and Kurama laughing in the background. The clone looked up from his job and towards his creator. He was amused really. The boss had made a note to not do another of his class was without someone nearby. What do you have there? The original Naruto asked his clone, who went back to his job. 2 boars and some rabbits, though one of them was white. I think it was grown in a cage. The clone, called CN from now on, answered. Naruto searched his arms for his supply seal, and took a bottle of pills from it. When you are done with that, take 2, they should keep you. Naruto searched for words, knocked, when I seal you, so you don't go insane. CN nodded and accepted the bottle. The pills were a creation of his. During an experiment of what happened to sealed object when inside a seal he had made a shadow clone and sealed it in a scroll, before dispelling it when it was still inside it. The clone had gone nuts after 10 minutes. The pills worked by causing the brain to shut down the sensory organs, keeping the drinker in a small coma until the counter pills were administered. It had taken him a full 3 years to develop them right. It took 20 minutes for the clone to finish skinning the game with Naruto's help. CN gulped down the 2 pills and threw the bottle back to the original, who caught them and re-sealed them. He moved behind CN as he fell back, making sure that his head fell in one of the seals on his arm, one that had less things, and sealed the clone until it was needed. Naruto sealed the meat on a separate scroll and started running towards the house. He had to tell everyone. Bedroom 10 minutes later, the genin were seated around Kakashi, while Kurenai was leaning against the doorframe. The Cyclops looked around. Everyone was watching, and Naruto had yet to come back. The reason I called you, he began speaking, is because of something I realized not much earlier. He sighed. What can any of you tell me about hunters? Everyone looked down, trying to remember what was said in the academy. Sakura was the first to answer. They are a special branch of the Anbu that deals with missing ninjas. Emotion from her sensei prompted her to continue. They track fugitives and kill them when they find their target. Kakashi nodded. What about the weapon the one that came for Zabuza used? No one answered. They were senbon, long needles used by Iryo Nin for acupuncture. He noted that Kurenai's eyes had widened. The reason few people use them for combat is that, while there are many nerves that can cause death, all are incredibly hard to hit from a distance. He paused for a second and looked at every genin in the eyes. The reason I am telling you this is because... He was interrupted by Naruto, who chose that moment to crash through the window. Zabuza is alive and he has 2 partners. Silence was what followed his proclamation, so he explained further. Yesterday I went scooping for information after I left the house. Kurenai and Kakashi nodded. Seeing where this would probably lead, I followed 3 cents into the forest, to a small hideout near a hill. Gato entered, followed by 2 wannabe samurais, and later left holding his hand. I entered the building through the ventilation system and listened in a conversation. Zabuza was alive. A girl and a boy, older than me by a couple of years, were discussing how to proceed. The girl was telling Zabuza that he would probably be at his top by next Tuesday. Kakashi looked proud that a genin could sneak around the enemy lines. I am surprised that they didn't discover you. But considering the number of times you managed to infiltrate and prank the clan compounds and Anbu HQ, it doesn't come as much of a shock. Judging by the faces of the brats, it did come as a shock for them. He clapped his hands. All right, acting upon the information Naruto brought, we will start training as soon as Kurenai says. Said woman raised an eyebrow. Kakashi, you won't use this as an excuse to stay in bed and read your smut. She was fixing him with the glare. Damn, ma, of course not. I'll help you as soon as I can stand up. He sighed when her glare was lifted. A shuriken dodged there. Naruto's voice made him look at the other end of the room. Anyo, Kakashi-san. Do you have some of this paper? The boy was holding 4 paper squares that didn't look as much. He knew better though. Yes, I always carry a pair with me. I use them as bookmarks. He patted one of his breast pockets. Why? Kurenai answered this. I was about to test my students in what their affinities were, and since I'm in charge of your squad until you can fight, I was going to test them too. The gray-haired man nodded and moved his hand to his pocket, opened his book and took 3 slips of paper. Here you go. He handed them to Naruto. Piece of advice for you, little Miss Hyuga. Don't be disappointed if you get no results. Almost no one of your clan does. Kurenai cleared her throat. All right kids, follow me. Everything we've talked about will be clear when we get to a clearing. Wait for me downstairs. The children nodded and left the room, leaving the two adults alone. Get well fast, Kakashi. We can't afford anything but 100%. The bedridden man nodded. I know, I should be up and about tomorrow, and in fighting condition by Friday. He laid down again. Have them complete the water walking before you start them on elemental affinities. It will help them if they can't complete the first level. The woman nodded and left the room, leaving Kakashi alone. Tsunami would later on walk in on him reading his special book, and would use a cooking pan to knock him out again. Clearing half an hour later. Kurenai stood in front of an eager group. Well, some were eager. Sakura was staring at Sasuke and Naruto was spacing off. She cleared her throat to get everyone's attention. Since we know that Zabuza is still alive, we will be training every day until he attacks. The genin nodded. Though Naruto was still not paying full attention, there isn't much to teach you right now, so I will show you something every ninja should know. She nodded towards the lake they were standing by, the water walking exercise. At their incredulous faces she demonstrated, walking to the middle of the lake. It is the same and different from the tree walking because water is in constant change, so the chakra output needed for the platform you need to create is always different. She looked around for questions, only to find herself confused when Naruto nodded at nothing before walking up to her. On the water. Kurenai-sensei, I already know this, do you think you could give me something more advanced? He scratched the back of his head in nervousness. Kurenai looked at him, shock obvious on her face, and judging by the faces the kids were pulling, they were surprised too. How do you know this? I'm pretty sure I haven't taught this to any of you, she told him in disbelief. Naruto looked even more nervous, and his answer was whispered. The seal leaks its chakra into me after purifying it. He pointed at the spiral on his stomach. I wouldn't be surprised if I got more chakra than Gigi. I had to learn to control it before the academy, Ibeo. She nodded, the Hokage probably knew this. She made a seal she was sure the boy would recognize, and a clone appeared by her side, leaving her slightly winded. The clone nodded at her creator. Follow me, Naruto-kun. I know something you'll probably find the use for. The clone left, followed by the redhead, leaving gaping genin behind. No one noted the angry scowl on the Uchiha's face. 50 meters from lake, Naruto was waiting for his sensei to explain the exercise and then dispel so he could try and figure the second part of the Rasengan while his clones worked on the control exercise that was about to be explained. Kurenai looked to the sky in an effort to get the explanation right inside her head, so her student could get after the first time. He was smart, but only so much higher than average. His wit only came out under pressure. The raven-haired woman nodded. The exercise would be perfect for someone like Naruto. A chakra juggernaut. Alright Naruto, what I want you to do is called Chakura no Pointorisu, a release of chakra from a single, or a group, of tenketsu. Naruto tilted his head. That wasn't much useful, was it? Most jonin learn this when, and if, they enter Anbu. The only reason I learned it was because of my specialty on genjutsu. So it was either hard, unpractical, required higher reserves or both. Kurenai continued as I reading his thoughts. The reason it's so unused is because of its impracticality on the field and its price as time goes on. So he could use it as much as the Kage Bunshin then. I works by sending a beam of chakra through a tenketsu, and them lowering and getting the output of chakra higher. The more practice you have with it, the more tenketsu you can send beams from. If you manage to get your output and number of tenketsu high enough, in theory you could stop your momentum or change its direction, giving you a way to dodge midair. That was so useful. Why the hell didn't more jonin learn this? Once again anticipating his words, she talked before he could. The reason only Anbu learn it is because unless you have a wind affinity, Iryo Nin control or way too much chakra, you can't really use it in the field, and that's not taking into account the burns using chakra in such a way could cause. Naruto's mouth formed an O at that. He had forgotten about chakra burns. The last time he had suffered from one of them was when Kurenai had started them on the weapon balancing, almost 3 months ago. So, he began. The only reason you are teaching me this is because the healing factor Kyuubi gives me, plus my huge reserves and wind affinity? The Genjutsu mistress nodded. Yes, you are probably the only person I can think of that can make use of this. She gave a small smile when the boy grinned at her praise. Start with places you don't have seals on. I don't think they would react well to the influx. She watched as the boy took off his coat and shirt, leaving him with only his pants on. His arms were full of tattoos up the elbow. When she saw his back she gasped. 6 lines were marked on it, running parallel on groups of 3. They looked almost like claws. Anima claws, she realized. Yet another thing to tell the Hokage. Nay, sensei, Naruto's brought her out of her musings. How do I know if I'm doing it right? She smiled. He had noticed she didn't give that bit of info. Release as much as you can and then make the quantity smaller until you can no longer diminish it. She saw him nod before sitting down. He put his hands on a ram sign and started leaking chakra. The result was unexpected, to say the least. His chest felt as if something was pushing it. He had to put his hand behind him so he didn't hit head, but just as he did the stream cut off, leaving him panting. That, he said, didn't go well. Not only had he underestimated his reserves, there was a blister on his chest, and it was big. Kurenai only smiled. Don't worry, Naruto-kun, she told him, I'm sure you'll figure it out. She was sure. He had managed harder things. The rest of the day he spent burning himself on different places. Dinner time at Asuna's house. A group of soaking genin found a red-skinned Naruto helping Tsunami on the kitchen. He had offered to help the woman with the food when he arrived because she didn't have much to prepare, so he had given her some steaks from the boar his clone had caught. His torso was uncovered, showing his toned back to the teens as they entered and making inner Hinata drool. His full concentration was in front of him. He had found a herb that when prepared right would make the rice taste incredible, but would make it uneatable if made wrong. So immersed into his recipe he was that he didn't notice when his teammates and Team 7 entered. He only noticed them after the rice was done cooking, so he was surprised when he saw 5 wet teens inside the living room. The surprise didn't last much though. After only a few seconds of staring he started to laugh like a madman. Sasuke scowled at the laughing redhead, though whatever he was going to say was put in harsher words by a wet and moody Inuzuka. What the hell are you laughing at, Ready? Normally the slight at his hair would have made him angry, but coming from the wet dog boy, nah. It's he managed to say in between laughs. I didn't realize it would be this funny to see another genin trying to water walk. His composure only stayed for a few seconds before he was reduced to another fit of giggles. The members of Team 7 growled at the purple-eyed boy while he tried to get his laughing under control. Shino, too, was staring angrily at the boy. His laughs were reminding him of one of his last failures of the exercise. A bugga had crossed him and his concentration wavered while he was thinking on how to add said insect to his hive at home. The only dry ones were Kurenai and Hinata, who were only wet around the ankles. They had probably lost control a couple of times before getting it back. Kakashi had descended from the stairs and the sound of laughing, and he started cackling as soon as he saw his team. Naruto and the man stayed like that for a while, and only stopped once Tsunami had told them that dinner was ready. Much like the day before, the meal was a silent affair, once again with the only noises being the scraping against plates. But something changed this time. Inari was particularly broody. The boy suddenly put his chopstick down. Why do you even try? His whisper made everyone's attention go to him. His head snapped up. Why do you try to go against Gato? You are just going to die. He pointed to Naruto, and you are going to be the first to go. So carefree, he didn't notice the room got colder. I bet you don't even know what it is to suffer. That made it. Faster than the teens could follow, Naruto had jumped over the table, grabbed Inari and was now holding him by the shirt against the wall. The room was freezing now, and not a single trace of ki was present. You think you have it hard? His whisper was loud enough to be heard by everyone, even if not intended. Try dealing through the fucking hell I live in a daily basis. Every adult, save the few smart ones, treat me like the plague. I was alone most of my childhood, shunned, starved. Do you know what the worst part is? Everyone but Inari shook their heads. That when I did found someone who cared for me, they were inside a seal so complex I can't even think about how to break it. The kid's eyes strayed towards the tattoo on his stomach. I had to see them as they seed around, trying to find a way of breaking free without killing someone on the process, and even if they don't show it, I can tell that they hate being like that. Silence fell for some seconds after that, but Naruto ignored it and continued after taking a breath. Do hate Gato? Then use your 2 damn arms and do something about it. Don't just sit in your room and brood. The hand gripping the shirt let it go, making Inari fall. Once again Naruto made his way to the door. I'm going to train, don't wait for me. I won't be back until midday tomorrow, he said without glancing back. Unknowingly he had sparked Inari's memory, and he heard a whisper on the back of his mind. If something is truly important to you, even it's heartbreaking, even if it's sorrowful, you keep on trying and trying, even if you lose your life, you keep on protecting it with these two arms. Then, even if you die, you leave behind the proof that you are a man, forever. He would do a lot of thinking that night.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.